you want to start the recording?
Recording is started.
All right, thank you very much. All right, this open meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order the July 8th meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee at 7 p.m. I am Narissa Wallen, Chair of the Triton Regional School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Erin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Goldner?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Maureen?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Caitlin?
Here and I can hear you.
Paulise?
Hi, Narissa, and I'm all ears.
Thank you, Paul. Linda? No, I saw her come in.
She's there. She's not
said
muted.
but we can't hear you, Linda.
Now you're muted.
Hear me now?
Yes. I'm assuming you can hear us.
I can hear you.
All right, thank you. Paul Mayette?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. And Tina wasn't coming. I don't know, did Kaylee join? Let's see, I don't see her on the
She is
list.
not on the list now.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative if you are present and can hear me. Brian?
Present and I can hear you.
Kim?
I'm present and I can hear you.
Kyle?
I'm present and I can hear you.
And Mr. McGee?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All right, and now I'll read aloud the vision statement. We're a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. All right, so welcome tonight and thank you all. I know it's been a tough schedule lately, so I appreciate everybody putting in the time to be here tonight. I actually had intended, thinking that she was going to be here, to just take a minute because one of the things that has been common in speaking with parents and teachers and people who have watched the last couple of videos of school committee meetings was all of them have gone out of their way to say how valuable Kaylee has been as an addition to the meetings. And I just think that deserves, I mean, I can't imagine doing it myself as a teen. And she has truly provided the student voice on this, on these meetings. So very grateful to that. And I'll be sure to convey that to her. Parents have called her wonderful and professional and just trying to think of all the other adjectives, but there's been a lot of great feedback on her participation. And I know we're grateful for that. And beyond that, I just wanted to go ahead and say we're going to be talking about a single topic tonight. That's going to be the September opening and budget implications. We'll do oral communications from the public in a minute, but tonight we're going to be very similar to the last couple of meetings where we're going to have a just overview of kind of what's been going on from Brian, Kim, Kyle, and David in their respective bailiwick, so to speak, and then we're going to have an open discussion of the school committee. Just a reminder, because I know we have been having more public than we traditionally have on some of these calls or watching it afterwards, that the oral communications from the public section of the agenda is the only time that we can receive guidance and communication from the public, that the rest of the meeting, as our professional association likes to say, is a meeting of the school committee in the public, not a meeting of the school committee with the public. So during that time, the only people that will be able to speak are the administration and the school committee members and our student rep if she does join us. That all to say, I know a lot of people are not comfortable in speaking during a public meeting like this. Even though it's not in person, the recording thing I think is a little daunting. So I just wanted to say, I know Brian will be talking about this, or maybe Kim a little bit later, but feedback is very welcome. I know I have been talking to, gosh, I don't know how many people that just reached out and said, hey, I'm concerned about this. Hey, have you talked about that? That type of thing over the last few days, or I just want to pitch in my 2 cents. And I think that's all valuable. So I would encourage you to continue doing that, because I think I said to somebody, we don't know where the gaps are until we know where the gaps are. And, sometimes that's really hard when you're coming from, one person's perspective or 9 people's perspective, or the perspective of administration, or the perspective of, whoever happens to be having the discussion. It's sometimes hard to see all the sides. There are those things that you don't even think about unless you're actively living them. So helping us find the gaps during this process is going to be very helpful for people who have a variety of perspectives on the issues that we're going to be talking about. So that said, I'm going to open it up for oral communications from the public, and I have to read a quick set of guidance first. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public, the meeting host muted you as you entered the meeting. If you would like to address the committee, please indicate now that you would like to do so, either by raising your hand on your video call, using the raise hand option on the participant screen, or using the chat option. The meeting host will unmute you so that you can address the committee. Please refer to the public comment policy language on the agenda when making your comments, and remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. When you have finished speaking, the meeting host will mute you again. All right, so with that, I will open it up for public comment.
I see 3. I don't see
What?
anyone raising a digital or literal hand, so.
I was gonna say, I didn't either, but sometimes I miss them, so. All right, moving on, item 4 on the agenda, fiscal year 21 September opening and budget implications. So I'm gonna hand this over to Brian, and we'll get straight into short rundowns on everything that's been going on, and then straight on from there into discussion. Brian, you muted yourself.
There we go. How about now?
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? So the hope is to give you some new context, what we've learned in the last week. Obviously, we don't have all the answers we need. There's still a great deal of information that we don't know, but the hope is to walk away from tonight with a little more information that we're able to provide to you. And I also had chatted with Narissa earlier about identifying a framing question. So I think that the key is, as we move forward, and we're meeting fairly routinely over the course of the summer, which is not the norm. But the routine meetings, I think, calls for me to ask the question in regards to information that you would find helpful. Obviously, the goal is a plan in writing, and that's, we're moving towards that process or towards that outcome. But in the interim, we don't have a written document, and we don't have concrete plans as they're changing in front of us as we, on a day-to-day basis. So, we've approached this with an eye towards giving you verbal updates. Any document that I would have given you last Friday would likely be somewhat different, if not entirely different, by this evening. So I don't know that a written document is always the best approach, but if there's other thoughts, other information, other requests for information that you would like to hear from us, certainly that would be welcome, and if you can share that with us tonight. I think the guiding question, you being a body that is charged with hiring, firing, and evaluating me, setting policy and setting the spending plan, the budget, over the course of the year. I think there's a key policy question that is emerging that is, there will be debate of whether it's in the school committee's purview to make the decision or not, but there's a very clear decision that was made in the guidance that was issued by the Department of Ed on June 25th to move away from what we all know as the norm for social distancing or physical distancing from 6 feet down to 3 feet. And in doing that, there are all kinds of, as you know, we've talked about different requirements, the biggest being that anyone grade 2 and older, all students grade 2 and older and all faculty and staff have to wear masks. So I think, there's been lots of discussions, obviously, with many, many individuals. And I think the policy decision that has to be made is, do you believe as the school committee making the decisions and setting policy for the district, that's a good thing? Is 3 feet a good policy, or should the policy be 6 feet? So that's not a question I'm going to say, hey, please answer that right now. May not even be a question we answer by the end of the evening. But I think that at 30,000 feet is the policy question that needs to be asked and answered, because that changes everything in regards to our approach, whether we're talking about fully in, fully remote, or somewhere in between with some type of hybrid, day on, day off, week on, week off, or some kind of variation in between there. So I put that out there at the beginning just to kind of set the context, so that as you're listening to the information I'm sharing, and Kim and Kyle and Dave, and the discussion that's happening amongst all of you, that you just have that in the back of your mind, that ultimately that's the decision that has to be made of whether or not you believe 3 feet is the right policy to move forward under, or is something more like 6 feet more appropriate. So again, we don't have those answers, and you don't have to answer that right now, but just if you can keep that as your context. So one thing I wanted to add just before we go full tilt into September and reopening, I just wanted to make sure you were all aware about the $95,000 that was approved at the Newbury Town meeting for cable access programming for Triton. So this happened last year. There was a motion made to amend, I believe the figure was 50,000 from Newbury cable money to put towards Triton. Salisbury SCTV is a separate 501c3 organization working with Lance. They came up with additional funds and all the equipment to bring us into the 21st century as far as broadcasting. I'm not going to know the name of all the equipment, but all the equipment, the microphones, the new cameras, having the ability to air live from the auditorium, from the gymnasium, and from the library. Your meetings are able to be broadcast live in Newbury. There's still a decision that has to be made with both the town of Salisbury and the town of Newbury whether or not they want to pick up that live signal. But the money that was spent last year produces a live signal on our campus and allows it to be to override the education channel if either of our 3 towns choose to do that. So this year, the money is almost double that 95,000, and the focus is going to be getting the stadium. Still don't know if it's hardwired, wireless, or what kind of technology, but having the ability to broadcast live from the stadium, whether that be athletic events or that was graduation ceremony, but being able to broadcast live, not to stream live, but broadcast live from the stadium. And then the bulk of the money, I think, will move towards setting up the studio out where Bob Lathrop and the VTV students produce the weekly VTV episodes, and actually giving them a 21st century studio with everything from teleprompters and lighting to actual green screens and sets. So so there was a post, I know Bob sent a tweet and a message out thanking them, and I just wanted to make sure that that information was shared with you as well. So exact details of what exactly will be happening, we're in the process of gaining quotes and figuring out exactly how much we can do with those funds. But that is certainly a very good thing for the VTV program. And I think we'll draw more interest from students when there's cutting edge technology that they'll be able to work with in producing the show. So just wanted to make sure that got out there. As Narissa said, I'm just going to go through a few quick updates, and then I'm going to ask Kim, Kyle, and Dave to do the same. Paul Lees, I know you're here. I can't find you on the screen. There you are. So you've asked a question the last 2 weeks in regards to surveys. I was actually in the process of preparing a survey and pinged my superintendent colleagues, and then lo and behold, we're now on a listserv with another personnel administrator organization, and this is actually a question that's been going around that led people to be sharing legal opinions. I checked with our legal counsel, and their advice was to not ask the question. Our legal counsel specifically for us advised to not ask the question of faculty and staff in regards to their plans for September. Certainly the TRTA is surveying their membership, and they have a right to kind of get that information, and Sue will share that information with me anecdotally. But the process, if someone is going to not be able to return, is very well documented. There's an FMLA process, there's a formal leave request. So we'll certainly be communicating with faculty and staff to say, if you don't believe, the assumption is everyone's returning. If you're not comfortable and want to talk about a leave of some sort, certainly be in touch. If you have any type of medical documentation, whether that's a disability or a condition or some type of immunocompromised situation, then certainly we would accommodate that and move forward with that as we would any FMLA request. So the recommendation was to steer clear of that now as much as everyone, and that was on the listserv. The question was, everyone just wants to know, right? And I think the genesis of your question, Paul, was it'd be really helpful to know that information, and absolutely it would. But without being able to give any concrete answers about what we will be able to do. So if someone says, I'm choosing not to come back, that's different than saying I can't come back. And how do we qualify who can and can't come back? So until we have a very clear situation in regards to what the fall will look like, the recommendation was to steer clear of that question. Also ask, the reopening group is working through the concept of a survey for parents and trying to figure out same thing. We don't want to in any way, we want to get information, but we also don't want to put information out there that leads people to believe that I know there was an email that was shared with me in regards to a superintendent asking questions about whether people would choose not to come back. And that's a very different thing if people are choosing not to come back and send their students back versus someone who has some type of medical condition, again, as I mentioned, that precludes them from doing so. So we will absolutely be surveying families and asking questions as we continue and get more clarity in the process. And so that first survey is in process, but we, again, need to be careful in regards to setting up a situation where we're alluding to something that we can't actually make a reality.
Brian, can you stop for just a second? Because I think Paul has a question.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, rather than have me repeat these questions again and again, can you share with the group, the school committee, the listserv questions and answers, and also the legal that you're getting on this issue about surveying the teachers?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
I will. I'll actually ask it for in a formal opinion rather than a back and forth, but I will get it in writing, which I have in writing in an email, but from our council rather than just the listserv. So the council we're getting from the advice we're paying for, particular to Triton. As far as the process moving forward, and we've talked about this each week, the North Shore Roundtable, the superintendents have continued to meet. The hope is absolutely that we move forward in a mindful and planful way and in a consistent way. We had made the decision on Friday, March 13th, collectively before the state did, as a region, as a North Shore region, to make the decision to close. All 24, however many districts it was, made the decision, fairly easy decision to make. In context, seemed difficult at the time. Now it seems easy. The reopening is a much more political, is a much more nuanced decision. So the hope is absolutely that we can get on the same page. The hope is absolutely that we can have consistency and plan for things like parents who are teachers in our district and have kids in neighboring districts and vice versa. So that's the hope. I would say that I think it's a fair assumption to say that that's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, given all the different players and the different beliefs. The discussion was to bring superintendents and the chair of the committee together maybe starting with a small group to make sure that superintendents and committees are speaking the same language and thinking through this the same way. So there's nothing formal there yet, but certainly a discussion that's hopefully going to evolve over the coming weeks. There was a question I asked of the Department of Ed. The guidance speaks very specifically to 6 feet is obviously preferred. That has been the norm from the CDC and the World Health Organization. You know, internationally, that's been the distancing norm. The guidance requires that all students grade 2 and up and all faculty and staff wear masks. And that allows us to decrease that buffer, if you will, that social distance to 3 feet. Masks for pre-K, K in first grade is optional. So I asked the question to DESE. There's now a basic, you know, kind of a general mailbox to ask questions. And so the question was, if it's not required, if we don't require students to wear masks, do we then have to maintain that 6-foot buffer for those students? So the response was, we are still waiting for the state's top medical experts to advise us on this scenario, but we'll let you know just as soon as we get the official word. So I understand that question was asked in many different ways and many different times. So that's certainly something that I think we need to address in regards to consistency, as far as what's the difference between 3 and 6 and why grade 1 and not grade 2 and vice versa. We have a Q&A that we've been developing. Obviously the goal is a written plan. That's the, you know, we need to have that eventually. I think there's lots of little boxes that need to be checked before we can put a plan in writing. But the hope is that we're going to develop, or no, it's not the hope. The hope is that we are absolutely moving towards a written plan, but in the interim, the hope is to provide a resource that can help answer questions that we do have answers to. There are questions that are coming to you. I know nurses shared some. We're getting them through teachers, through principals, through Kim. So as we get the questions, we're going to compile them into a Q&A, and it's going to be a new page off of our Stay Connected page. That's going to be live by the end of this week. We'll date each of the questions and responses so that as they change, folks know that if they come back and look at the same question and there's a new date, the answer might have changed. So the first question there actually asks or answers the question about the planning process, and talks about the reopening group that has been established, the parent, teacher, student, administrator representation, and actually offers there's a new email address. It's reopening@tritonschools.org. So that email address will be shared out with the community to say, if you have considerations that you want the reopening working group to take a look at, shoot an email. It could be a basic question that might get a very quick answer, or it might be something that's obviously far more nuanced and needs a lot more discussion to be able to answer. So Kim and I will field those questions. Those that are quick answers, give some quick answers, update the Q&A, so that people, hopefully it becomes the resource people can point to say, if you have any questions, check here first, because hopefully those questions that we can answer, we will have answered in that resource. As far as funding, you heard about the technology grant. There's the up to $225 per pupil. I guess there's really nothing new as far as the budget. So this is really the update on the budget as far as tonight goes. The $25 million technology grant was issued. It is a competitive grant. It is not a formula grant. So the language in there very much speaks to the fact that it's based on highest need, and need both, financially, socioeconomically, the Chapter 70 indicators, as well as as far as technology numbers and device numbers. So I don't suspect that we're going to rise to the top as a high need district. So I think any money that we do get through there, we're certainly going to apply. Kim's working with Deb, and certainly we'll at least put in an application and see what we can receive from that. But the second pot of funds, which is $205 million, that will go towards that it's out of the CARES funding. It's up to $225 per pupil. We're waiting to see what that will bring to us. That is an allocation formula. So that's not something we apply for. That's something where we will have an allocation somewhere between $0 and $225 per student. So for us, 225 would give us $500,000. So that will certainly be the most likely pot of funds that we would have in addition to any funding that we are expecting. The question will be, where do we lose money in regards to state aid? The other bank of funds that the governor has actually, the Lieutenant Governor had a briefing about is about $503 million that was earmarked for cities and towns. That's now being talked about unilaterally through the governor using that money to put towards schools instead. I guess my question would be, is that going to be used to backfill Chapter 70 losses, or is that going to be, again, an additional pot of funds that's managed and appropriated outside of the budget process? So we will have to see what that means for us, but we don't have any confirmed information yet. But hopefully in the coming weeks, we're going to have a little more clarity around exactly how much we will be able to receive from that. And Kyle will be able to talk about our first big bill of PPE here in a few minutes when I stop talking about how we're going to use that first pot of funds. Wanted to share that I did speak with Deb Rogers. So we have 3 health agents, Frank and Rowley, Jack and Salisbury, and Deb Rogers in Newbury. Just had a very preliminary discussion. And the question was in regards to, we'll call it the debate, right? I mean, there's a raging debate about the decision to move the social distance from 6 feet to 3 feet. And so it's just trying to get some context. The Lexington plan, which is now probably the most talked about document in the state, specifically speaks to the fact that the health agent in town decided that 6 feet is safe, 3 feet is not. I'm paraphrasing, but that's in essence, that was with the support of the health agent in town. So it was trying to get a sense of whether our health agents felt similarly. So I asked her what I could say, and I want to quote her, but in essence, she has concerns, right? So the question is, there's lots of rules, CDC guidelines in place that talk about quarantining and our response when someone is diagnosed. Anyone that spent more than 10 minutes in close contact, which was 15 minutes, now it's 10 minutes within 6 feet of someone that is diagnosed. They have to be quarantined for 14 days. So if we're already bringing people inside of 6 feet as our norm, then that changes everything and is quite a drastic response then, if and when the inevitable case does pop up in the school. So she certainly didn't give any firm guidance, and is waiting, I think is waiting with as much anticipation as we are. DPH is issuing guidance through health agents at about the same pace that we're getting information through the Department of Ed. So it's changing daily, it's changing weekly. They meet twice weekly. So there's in her estimation, there's a lot more clarity that needs to happen before she would be able to say, yeah, 3 feet is a good idea. Again, not ready to say it's not, but certainly shared the concern in regards to the kind of the mechanics and the way that works. So I think that's it. I'm gonna hand it off to Kim to give an update. Obviously, the working group has been doing lots of work with Kim at the helm, processing with many individuals. So we'll have Kim give us an update on the work that group has been doing. And I think she's frozen. Is anyone seeing her move?
No.
Nope, frozen solid. So Kyle, let's talk about PPE.
Happy to jump on in.
All right, there we go.
Excellent. So PPE, for anybody who will be listening in on this, personal protective equipment. So since the state came out with their guidance in early June over PPE, it detailed out certain required PPE items that the schools should be keeping on hand, as well as recommended supply levels. When this guidance was released, right away, the state indicated that they would help facilitate the purchasing process. They came out with a list of qualified vendors and the types of PPE that each provides. One of the big issues at hand is the lead times associated with delivery of these products. Just monitoring the situation over the last month, we've seen the lead times shorten, and now all of a sudden they're starting to lengthen again. I was actually reading an article today that this makes sense, attributable to the various areas in the country that are seeing hotspots and expanding cases. So today, actually, the state or DESE had a Zoom conference call. They came out with a list of 8 different qualified vendors and 9 that all carry 9 different PPE items. How do I say it? It wasn't quite what we were anticipating it to be. Certainly, it's a nice tool that helps facilitate the process. There is a mechanism where through the state website, it's called Combis. It's a e-purchasing module where we can buy these 9 different PPE items directly from the vendors facilitated by the state. Unfortunately, there are certain items that we can get right away. Hand sanitizer is one of them. Masks seem to be readily available. Some of the tough items right now are gloves. Those are the lead times on those are quite extensive. What we did as a district in the interim over the last month while we were waiting on this guidance is we actually reached out to a few other vendors to get price quotes on these items, lead times, et cetera. We've been talking with other cities, towns, and districts as well. So when all is said and done, we've come up with what our anticipated quantities are based on that DESE guidance, where they recommend having 12 weeks worth of supplies on hand based on certain scenarios. For example, that every student receive 1 mask per day, that every staff member, teacher receive 1 mask per week. So what we'll have to do is, there's definitely a sense of urgency right now over this, just because those lead times are increasing and the demand is increasing. We want to get that first order in this week. The question will be, which I think we'll want, certain items don't really have a shelf life. Hand sanitizer, get all we can get. We can't have enough of that. Masks, I think it's pretty reasonable to have the quantities that DESE is recommending. And then one thing we do have to sort out too is it's evident looking at how the state procured these quotes that all the PPE supplies, it's not necessarily apples to apples. The gowns, for example, where one vendor's quoting 50 cents and another vendor's quoting $7.50. I don't think they're the same product, so we want to make sure we're getting what we need. So we're moving ahead quickly with this to get that initial order in so that we can have these supplies delivered sooner rather than later. As I mentioned, Friday's the goal there. Brian already highlighted on the revenue streams that we can use, the grant funds, to pay for these PPE supplies. And then also relating to PPE, tomorrow we're going to have a meeting of the Facilities and Operations Working Group, where we're going to, outside of PPE, talk about a few other things, spatial logistics, the various elements of the 3 school reopening plans as they relate to the facilities, classrooms, how they'll be set up, the HVAC systems, what the specs are, making sure everything's up and running, as well as what how the systems are designed, what types of air purifications our existing systems provide, and if there's any other needs there that are outlined in the DESE guidance, as well as just best practice, so that we can have a safe environment for students and staff. So you kind of talked a little quick there, but any questions? Anything, Brian, you think of outside of that?
I was going to say, did you mention Lucinda's joining us tomorrow as well to talk about
Yes.
food services and how that will function in regards to the overall? Obviously, we know she can do this, right? She's been doing it through the pandemic. So with the grab and go likely being a solution, if not the solution, the question becomes logistics of how that's produced, delivered to classrooms. Is there a way to deliver it in the cafeteria? those are the logistics we have to work through. So she's part of that as well.
And as part of this working group, we have Lucinda, Brian, myself, we have the head custodians, we have the athletic director, head school nurse, elementary school representative, high school, middle school representative. So a good field of individuals in different areas.
So I'll open it to questions from the committee. I'm going to scroll. Erin, did you have your hand up? Go for it.
So has there been any discussion at all about purchasing cloth masks for the staff, perhaps, so that maybe they were able to have a couple of cloth masks from us and be able to wash them as opposed to just giving them one paper mask a week?
So it's a paper mask a day.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Kyle had said having on hand one paper mask per week
So
for the
one per-
staff and one per kid per day.
It's
Yeah,
the
that's-
actual, yeah, it's the opposite. It's
opposite?
one per
Okay.
student per week and one per,
Okay.
yeah. But-
And this is, oh, go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead.
So this is the perfect example of how we're looking at DESE's guidance, seeing what's required and what's recommended, and making sure we're smart about it. Because one thing we had chatted about was in polling teachers, everybody has a preference on what types of mask or face covering they like. So while DESE recommends the one mask per staff member per week, is there a group of staff members who wouldn't even want one of those paper masks? Would they prefer the face coverings? Some of the vendors that we reached out to quotes for directly, they are providing the cloth masks when you look at them on an individual basis, it's a more expensive individually, but when you map it out to say, wait, these are washable, reusable, it actually could be more financially viable. So to your point directly, we've chatted about polling staff members to see if they would prefer that option.
We actually, when we were talking about it, I was actually shocked that the break-even point was within about 8 weeks. We can buy 5 cloth masks, and so everyone has a full week's worth and a fresh one every day, and wash them all on the weekend. And we can get them screen printed with Triton logos, and we can get a gingham and a stripes and a polka dot, so we can make sure we completely coordinate with outfits and everything. And it's by week 7 or 8. It's more cost effective to buy those than it is to go pure paper.
So can I follow up on that
Of
too?
course.
Would we have to then in turn ask the attorneys whether or not that was okay if DESE's telling us that we need to get the paper ones?
No, that wouldn't be. There would be nothing legal there. So the requirement is a facial covering, right? So the cloth facial covering is in the same category, if you will, of what we would be doing for paper mask, which is just like a basic surgical mask, with the nose piece. These aren't KN95s. They're certainly not N95s that have to get pressure tested and, fit tested. So it's in the same genre, so that would be fine. We can certainly get guidance, but it's not, the requirement is a facial covering, a cloth or, this type of facial covering.
You good, Erin? Paul Mayette?
It's a question in the similar vein. Will there be any policy, and this affect your purchase questions, for staff providing their own masks if they have a particular something that the district isn't able to provide that they feel more comfortable in? Is that something, first, it would be allowed under either DESE guidelines or health guidelines, local health guidelines, and then does that affect your calculus there?
So I would say absolutely allowed. Again, same thing. Some people might choose to wear the gaiter style. That might be nice in the winter when you're not worried about sweating. Probably not the best right now. But yeah, so some people prefer the gaiter that you can kind of just pull up and over your nose and it covers everything. Some people like the bigger wide open cloth. Some people like the fitted. So absolutely, again, the requirement in the guidance is facial coverings. It doesn't, it's literally, it's either category, if my understanding is it's facial coverings, or it's a certified type covering like an N95, where we have a nurse who's with an exposed patient and they're wearing a face shield and a N95 and gowns and gloves and booties and everything, the whole 9 yards. So yes, absolutely. When we get to that point, if people, we could, we were talking about querying staff to say, would you rather get a daily paper mask? Would you like us to provide you with 5 really cool Triton Viking ones? Or do you plan on purchasing your own and using your own, in which case that would obviously change the cost. As Kyle was saying, I think the majority of this PPE, we've gone back and forth, and other districts have gone, full steam ahead and bought what seems like 7 years worth of PPE. Others have been a little more cautious because it's big dollars. These are not small dollars we're talking about. The initial order of in the vicinity of 55,000 paper masks at 50, 60 cents a piece. You're talking about 27,000 just for the masks. So it's certainly changes things, and it would save money. But I don't, even the initial order, there's not, all of this stuff will have a shelf life, and we will be using this ultimately at some point. Someone will be using those paper masks, whether it's nurses or someday when students and teachers are not, maybe, but nurses are and other people's are. Hand sanitizer, I don't think there's any danger in overbuying this stuff, because it's, regardless of how we transition back, we will be back in schools in the new norm someday. So there's going to be a process to get there. So, but that absolutely, to that point, yeah, absolutely, it would save money if people are going to choose to use their own facial coverings. And again, the guidance from DESE is that it requires students to come with facial coverings. Families are providing those, where the suggestion is that we buy and provide 1 paper mask a week, on the assumption that some kids will forget occasionally. We'll have to see the logistics on how that plays out, because that's a huge assumption. So,
Other questions from the committee? I am not seeing any. I have 2, Kyle, just to kind of take this back to basics. Can you talk about the 6 items that you had to order? I think you said there were 6. How many of each item you're ordering, or how much? I'm imagining it's gallons of hand sanitizer, not, bottles.
Right.
And about, if you have a ballpark on the cost already?
Yeah, so I can just run down the list of most of them. Some of them, so disposable paper masks, that's a big one. Providing them for both students and staff. We're estimating, based on that DESE recommended quantity levels, of 55,000 paper masks. Powder-free gloves, estimating about 10,000 of those. Face shields, 150. Safety goggles, 150 of those. Disposable gowns, 10,000. N95 masks, those are reusable, about 10,000 of those. And then hand sanitizer, big one there. And then also, which this is one of the apples and oranges thing, the waste disposal, whether the bags or their actual canisters type thing. And same, actually, the apples and oranges, like I mentioned before, with the disposable gowns. You can see some are, maybe they're reusable, I'm not sure, but the price differences there were significant. Walking down the prices, the masks, the paper masks are about 56 cents each. Gloves, 9 cents. Which vendor am I looking at right here, actually? So this is the challenging aspect too. You are what I found is the vendors who are less expensive have greater lead times. If they're able to provide them more quickly, certainly they're more expensive. If we just take the paper masks, for example, one vendor's providing them at 92 cents each, one 52 cents each, 56 cents each, another $1 each. Same thing with hand sanitizer. For a one pint bottle, some are at $13.67 for the pint, and then another was, it was just a couple dollars. So there is some consistency in those more readily available items. I think where you do see the greater variation is those ones with the significant lead time. And it also should be noted that all vendors didn't provide all of the products. So I've been talking to a few others in the school community, city to town community, and they've been using they received some quotes directly from some other vendors. They're going to be sending me that information as well. So I can
Just to clarify, I was going to say, so
Oh,
the
go ahead.
masks are universal, right? The paper, kind of called surgical masks, are universal. The rest of and I'm sorry, I should say the hand sanitizer will be more prevalent than water in our buildings. But other than that, everything else is pretty much primarily the KN or the N95 respirator masks. They're actually kind of reusable with filters. That's strictly for the nurses. The gloves, the gowns, certainly the face shields, that's primarily for the nurses. We're quantifying those, assuming that we have a nurse and potentially a substitute nurse in the buildings, depending on the need, right? If we have COVID cases, we have to be able to kind of delineate the two. And then there's also kind of a high needs population that certainly those folks working with individuals, anyone who is near someone that might be suspected, as well as someone who might be in very close contact just by the nature of a student's disability or their age or what have you in the work that they do. There might be some variation of that additional PPE that they need. But it's the masks and the sanitizer that are the universal PPE.
And I'll follow up real quick too, just on the what I went over as well. This all just came out this afternoon, so I'm working on consolidating it into a nice usable sheet so that we can truly analyze who has the best cost with the most reasonable lead time. So be wrapping that up shortly.
Thank you. My other question is, I know the DESE guidance calls for a separate space where any potential COVID cases could be not quarantined, but isolated, after they're presented to the nurse. Is that part of the facilities discussion tomorrow, or is that being handled separately?
Both, tell you the truth. So we had an initial meeting with our facilities director, the lead school nurse, and the school principals, where they walked through the buildings to see the feasibility of where to set those up, how they would set them up. So they had that initial meeting and walk through, and then we're going to be discussing that tomorrow at our meeting as well.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have anything for Kyle? Follow on or not seeing any? All right, Kyle, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or are you off? That wrapped you up? All right, thank you.
That's good.
Thank you, Kyle. So I was going to say, before we go over to Kim, and I think the Seagull's back, but just so you know, Kaylee did join us. I didn't know if you wanted to take an opportunity to share your earlier remarks again.
I did. So welcome, Kaylee. For anybody who hasn't met Kaylee, she's our student rep to the school committee. And Kaylee, I just had talked about this during chairman's comments a little bit, but I had heard from a number of parents online, text messages, just happening to pass them on the street as I'm walking my dogs, that type of thing as I've been out. And it's been really interesting because a lot of them have said, hey, I watched the school committee meeting. And usually the first thing is, it's, rough. I don't want to be in your shoes. And then the second thing they say is, your student rep is amazing. So I just wanted to let you know that you are well appreciated. Half of them don't even know your name, but they very much appreciate the input and the student voice that you're able to provide. And I know we always say that to you, but I wanted to let you know that almost every single conversation that I've had, that has been said about you. So.
Thank you. And sorry I'm so late. I had work the last 2 days, so I just didn't see the email until just now, but
I appreciate you coming. You're always welcome. Always
come
welcome.
late, come early. Great to have you here. Thanks, Kaylee.
Thanks, Kaylee. All right. And Kim apparently had to turn off her video to get a stable connection, but she, I believe, is back, and it's hard to tell when she's just a seagull.
Are you there, Kim? I don't think they pay their cable bill.
All right, can we move on to David? And
So we'll move to Dave, and then I'm just going to pause. I'll try and get a hold of her. while Dave's chatting.
All right, so just an update on summer program. So typically this is the week that we begin summer services in person. It usually runs very smoothly. We have a variety of services. Some is just tutoring for students, and others for a more severe population. We have programs that run from anywhere from 16 hours to 20 hours a week, with therapies and services all provided. What I did the week before last is sent a letter to parents saying we were going to begin with remote services, and we were going to push the program out 1 week, just because we needed this week for people to contact families and develop schedules. I met with all the tutors and all the program teachers this week, so they're in the process of setting up schedules for parents. Our goal is to try to, once we have all the protective equipment, is to try to see some kids in person if possible. But as you can see from the restrictions, many of these kids that are the most vulnerable are the kids that you cannot, it can't even be 3 feet. You know, we're talking students with autism or severe disabilities, or they need toileting, they need close contact. So, I mean, that's going to mean that the staff are going to have to be in the full gear to keep the kids safe. So right now the plan is to start with remote, and then as we move forward to see if we can start to get, even we talked about getting some kids into the building, even to have a tour or to get back in the classroom and just see, you know, what the new situation may look like, you know, seeing teachers in masks, because my biggest fear is that kids walking in on day 1 in September is going to be shocking to see all the changes and the way that the kids move through the hallway, the way they transition. No, I'm going to say parents have been very, very patient, but as the weeks go on, I see that patience slipping away, and they're not, you know, they're not blaming the district. They're not, it's just frustration because a lot of the kids with the most severe needs are not being successful with remote learning because they need somebody right with them. We have a lot of kids that have one-on-one instruction, so that means the parent has to become the teacher. So it's very difficult for some of those families, you know, to manage their lives and also their children's education. A lot of the out-of-district placements are starting to open up, but they're not opening up fully. So they're having certain days that kids come in, and some of it's remote. So they are beginning sort of a hybrid process. There have been some ideas about possibly doing some things outdoors, setting up tables or something in a one-on-one setting. But again, my plan is to use these couple of weeks to, again, the services this week was done to just organize and be in contact with families. Next week, the remote learning will start. And then I indicated it would be at least 2 weeks of remote learning. And then we'll have to see if we can start to get kids into the buildings if possible. But again, all these criteria need to be met in terms of the safety protocols. I've also had a number of staff that have just emailed me personally and said, if it were to be in person, I'm not comfortable coming back. So I've just sort of taken that and said, you know, just sort of to keep track of that, because obviously summer program is a little different because it's not a requirement. Everybody who applied is doing it for extra, you know, it's an extra, it's not part of their contract, it's extra. So the responses vary from some parents saying, I'm fine, please, you know, come to my house, I don't mind, wear a mask. But you know, with the guidance from Brian and the leadership team, we want to be consistent. So just because one parent feels comfortable and a teacher feels comfortable, we don't just want to sort of let things loose and let people sort of make their own decisions. So I'm trying to, you know, have a consistent approach, because the responses from people vary. Like I said, from people being very nervous, I'm not sending my child back to school, to I'm ready right now, you know, as long as you wear a mask, or come to my home. And these are most of the families with the most significant students with autism, students that need physical therapy, occupational therapy, and you just can't provide physical therapy from 6 feet or even 3 feet away. It's a hands-on approach, and You know, like I said, even our students with autism, there's just no way, even a 3 feet barrier is not going to work because they will find a way to be down the hallway in a few minutes or whatnot. I mean, they really need that structure. So, and that's the guidance we're getting from the department, is that we want you to see those most vulnerable kids in person first. But that requires the most intensive protocols. So there is a call tomorrow with Russell Johnston regarding the latest guidance in summer programming. So again, that's the plan for now. But again, it really depends on sort of when we have the sort of the protective gear to make sure everybody's safe. You know, and again, parents need to be comfortable, staff needs to be okay with it to begin with. But again, the goal is to even to try to get kids into the building, even if it is just for a half hour, an hour, just to see a teacher live and in person, one-on-one. So that's a plan. That's a plan moving forward. But again, parents have been very, very patient and understanding, but it's definitely starting to run out a bit, just because they're looking at, I mean, I think we all thought this might be over in a couple of weeks, and now they've gone through remote learning since March, and now they're looking at a whole summer of not having in-person services. And like I said, some of our most intensive kids, they would be getting 20 hours a week of 5 hours a day, 4 days a week. So now those parents are, forced to sort of do the same thing over the summer. And, some are just opting out. Some are just saying, I just can't, I'm going to take the summer and just enjoy summer. And I'm not, I just can't commit to that, which I don't blame them. I mean, so any questions or?
Questions from the committee for David?
I'm sorry.
Paul Lees? Paul, you're still muted.
I don't have a question so much for David, just a comment for Brian.
Oh, we just lost your audio, Paul.
If we're having people, yes?
Yep, you're good.
If we're having difficulty getting staff back in the building now, aren't we going to run into the same problem in September on a much greater magnitude? And I'm getting fascinated to see the advices from legal counsel about this.
Yeah, I would say the difference is this is additional work versus people's full-time job. So as David mentioned, this is additional optional work. So is there a potential implication there? Absolutely. Do I want to ask the questions? Of course I do. I just, the reality is, until we have clarity about specifically what we're able to offer, my personal opinion, and I'll forward the email from our counsel, is that it potentially creates more of a challenging situation than actual data that helps us.
The other thing I would add to that is that we don't, at this point, we don't have a clear plan that we can tell them that, okay, that like when you come in, you can see one student at a time. We'll have this equipment ready for you. These are the circumstances under which you can see the student. So like I said, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, if things open up, we can start to give more clarity around what we would be able to do to see a child in person. And again, it's a lot of people are fine and they're ready to go, and some people are just, if they're in a category that's the most vulnerable, or they have something that's a medical condition, they obviously are the most concerned. But a lot of teachers are fine with it, but some are not. So that's just, but I think as Brian said, this is different because summer is really a voluntary, people apply, it's not part of their contract. So that's, I just ask people to contact me privately, just their level of comfortability if summer program was to be able to be held in person. So people, and again, I don't know if this is possible, but I've got a lot of good feedback on, I'd be willing to do it if it could be outside, like say a tutoring session could be at a table with a canopy outside the building with masks. And some of the kids who get tutoring could be 6 feet apart because you have, let's say a middle or high school student that's receiving tutoring in math or reading. They don't need to be side by side. So that's another, that's been something that teachers have been sort of more open to, is just something, beginning it outside rather than in the building. So that's just, I've just said that we need to really take the next 2 weeks to talk about this. And and have a consistent approach. Because I've had individual teachers say, I'm fine with seeing the student, the parent's fine, can I see them in person? And at this point, I've just had to say no, because we can't just start making individual concessions until we have everything, it needs to be under our control in terms of, especially one situation was it was a neighbor or something and said, the student lives next door and the parent's fine with it. Do you mind if I see them in person? When I just had to say that we can't, as much as I would have liked to say yes, I said that we need to be consistent and control it rather than sort of just make individual decisions.
Yeah, and I think I would just to clarify. So I think when we get to the fall, we're going to have to differentiate, right, in differing situations, and we're going to have to do different things to meet different students' needs. But the concern now, to Dave's point, is we're not set up to make sure we've got the PPE, the protocols, the distancing, all of the physical setup to make sure that we, especially if it's happening outside of our doors, if it's then a district program, that becomes a huge liability if we don't have that all set up. So.
All right, I know Linda has a question. I just want to note too, again, that we can't take questions from the public during this part of the meeting. This is exclusively a discussion between the school committee and the administration and our student rep. But you're welcome to, of course, email the superintendent. The school committee has an email at schoolcommittee@tritonschools.org. And then if it's about fall reopening, there's a new email address, reopening@tritonschools.org. So I'll send that over to Linda for her question.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I know that the students with disabilities, the impact of the schools being closed probably has a greater impact on these kids. Has any of the parents mentioned that the longer that these kids are out of school, that they possibly are going to be harder to get back into the school?
Yes, yeah, I would say that's a consistent theme. I think, in terms of all students are going to have regression because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but obviously kids with disabilities are going to be more impacted. So yes, that's been a concern expressed by a lot of the parents in terms of, what's going to happen when they return. But again, I mean, my response has to be consistent that we have to make sure we have all the safety protocols in place. So I think parents understand, but they're just, it's just frustrating for everybody. It's frustrating for everybody, including administration and staff, because usually, our summer program runs pretty smoothly every year, and it's, we have, 60, 70 kids. We have the programs at NES. We have plenty of staff that come back every year and therapists, and, we have very little problems every year, and we're able to provide those services. So everybody is certainly frustrated. The problem is we just don't have a good answer to give at this moment. Like I said, other than we're waiting on more guidance, and our hope is to try to start to get kids into the building in some form or fashion. Now, obviously, it won't be the same. It won't be the same amount of time. But like I said, even to get a student in for a therapy session or a one-on-one session for 45 minutes, just to get them reacclimated to the building would be a big win moving forward. So, I mean, we have 5 weeks to, a couple weeks over. I said the first 2 weeks would be remote, and then we'd look at from that point on trying to get kids in the building. So we have, it's not a lot of time, but at least we have some time to sort of see what our plan would be if we could have kids physically in the building. But again, first, we have to have all the precautions in place first.
And to confirm, the comprehensive state guidance from DESE on summer program was issued on July 1st.
Right.
6
Yeah,
days ago.
and I know a big question is the PPE and all that. Are we going to make sure that all the PPE guidance is making sure everybody has that PPE before being able to see any of the kids?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and there would also have to be training. So in other words, if they're seeing, I mean, teachers are not used to being like, say, if you have a student in the, one of our students with autism that needs to be literally side by side working with that student, and they have to be in full gear. Teachers aren't used to doing that. Like, so there's going to be training in terms of, okay, what happens when I'm done? Do we need to change the whole outfit after every child I see? So there's going to be a ton of training that needs to be involved other than just, here's a box of stuff, go, put it on kind of thing. So.
I think a big thing is going to be those students getting used to seeing their teachers and support staff in all that gear as well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
No, I agree.
Thanks, Linda. Paul Lees is next.
David, in the state guidance that was issued on July 1st, did they tell you that you cannot teach the students during the summer?
No. No, they said that, you must, there's options in terms, we have to provide services if it's on their IEP, but schools have it's almost like the same options as, remote or hybrid or in person, but the first step is having all the protocols in place to actually be able to see kids physically. So we're obligated to do it, and we're, again, so we're just continuing on the remote learning plan, except the only difference is the teachers have had 3 months of experience to enhance the process, in terms of providing a good quality program as best they can through remote.
Okay. Kaylee's next.
So I know we had just talked a bit about having the students see the teachers in person as well, because it's going to take time to get acclimated, but have we stopped to consider all of the students that have sensory processing disorders that won't be able to work with all of the PPE in the same?
Lost Kaylee. Why don't we hold her question until she hopefully reconnects? And I know Paul Goldner had a question, and we'll try to come back to Kaylee as soon as Paul's done. Oh, we'll come back to you in a second, Kaylee. Go ahead, Paul.
It's actually a very similar question to Kaylee's, and good for Kaylee, high school student, for spotting this. But I think across the board, we're going to be seeing some behavior increases because of students needing consistency, students not being able to wiggle at the lower grades, and students with those sensory processing disorders. So we're going to be having those increased behaviors, and with some of our more challenging students, those behaviors are going to be more challenging. And as we move from one student to another, having to change the protective gear is going to take time, and so it's going to take us longer to respond to some of those when we need to have behavioral interventions.
Yeah, but I think in terms of, I think there are also some exceptions for a student, say a student with autism with severe sensory issues that has aversion to certain textures or a face covering, that they would be exempt from wearing a mask. But again, that's going to have to be, we're going to have to really look at those kids individually and see how that works. But I think in terms of a true crisis, if we had a student that was being physically, either hurting themselves or someone else, would have to react in good faith and not necessarily have to change gear to respond, I think. And that's just going to, we have to use, that would be ideal if you could do that, but obviously we need to respond as soon as we can if there's a dangerous situation, in any of our programs. But yeah, you are correct. I think people are envisioning that kids who have been out of their routine for, 6 months are going to come in, with a lot more behaviors. But that's also can be an approach of, we may need to sort of not lower our expectations on, because we don't want to keep them high, but just sort of start with a routine and get them in the building and almost starting from scratch as if they're entering school for the first time and not just come in with heavy demands. So I think that's going to be, fortunately, we have 2 really good behavior analysts that work in the district, and they can certainly be helpful to all of us in terms of developing a plan once we get kids back.
And I know, I'm sure Kim will mention this in regards to the focus of the reopening group, but mental health will absolutely be the primary focus when students return, because whether you have a disability or you don't have a disability, or you're young or old, this will be challenging to go from In some cases, some families have still remained completely isolated, some not so much, but many kids who normally would be typically behaving, who have been isolated for 6 months, and it's going to be a challenge to return. So certainly those populations that, or those disabilities that will make that even worse, we're going to have a lot of work to do. We should mention that as part of the PP order, we actually went in with, I think, 5 other districts in ordering what I believe is an entire truckload of, it's called the Clear Mask. You can actually find it at clearmask.com. And it's actually a clear, I don't know what it's kind of like the same thin clear glass that you would use on like a hockey helmet, but it's a kind of foam across, and it's just got clear, and then it rests below the chin. So you can see facial expressions, you can see clear through. So any students who have hearing loss, who rely on reading lips, students on the spectrum who certainly facial cues and are an important part of communication. We've even talked about, do we have enough to be able to have them basically in the primary grades, pre-K right on up through first, second grade, where you're building those relationships. And it's really hard when you're walking down the street next, you go by someone and you smile and you realize, oh, they didn't see that smile. So they look like you just stared at them. So hopefully that will be, those are the types of things we'll hopefully be able to put in place so that we can accommodate those needs as best we can.
All right, thank you. And we're going to come back to Kaylee. I apologize. We lost you in the middle of your question, Kaylee. So if you could, I don't know, I would say start from the beginning at this point, probably, if that's okay with you.
I have a feeling that it was covered because Paul's question was pretty similar, but it was mainly how are we planning to prepare ourselves and to help the students that we have that do have the sensory processing disorders, which I feel as though was just covered. So
yes, yeah, Paul said his question was very similar to yours, so I think that was pretty good.
Great minds think alike.
Other questions from the committee? All right. And I just had one question for you, David, which was, have we made purchases to be able to set up outdoor areas, or are there outdoor areas that we could potentially be using already? Since it sounds like that was a common thing that you heard when you were getting feedback.
So no, we haven't. So it just happened this week as I had the meetings on Monday and Tuesday, I think, with the staff, and that just came up as so it may not even require a purchase. It could be just a table with chairs, in terms of, but again, we still have to, that would probably be, in my mind, that would almost be for like a tutoring session. So if students receive, say reading 2 times a week for 45 minutes, and people were amenable and we had all the safety precautions in place that they could meet, whether appropriate, could possibly meet outside, or that just came up as an idea of teachers feeling more comfortable being just outdoors. So, but I wouldn't think we'd have to purchase much in terms of, we just have to decide, where we would set it up, and if it's something that we can pull off safely. So.
Okay, thank you. Kaylee?
on the outdoor space note, could we possibly utilize the courtyards? Because then it would be closed doors as well, so we wouldn't have students who are typically known for having had past trauma that causes them to bolt when confronted or certain things like that. Could we use that as an area that would be confined?
Yeah, it's a good idea. I would have to, probably I would connect with like Chris Walsh or the other committee to sort of look around and look at spaces in each school that might be appropriate for a comfortable space where parents could pull up, drop off their student. But yeah, no, it should be an inviting environment and not, out in the parking lot somewhere or, so yeah, no, it's a great suggestion.
Just notes a space, I know at the high school at least, what we don't normally utilize anymore that is readily available.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Yeah, it sounds good.
If I may too, so we have the facilities and operations working group tomorrow. I'll make sure to bring that up. Thank you.
Police.
So David, I'm just wondering, well, that meeting is going to take place tomorrow about facilities. What about using gymnasiums? for the children that are less disabled and may just need some math assistance or some reading assistance, wouldn't gymnasiums be the great place to start?
Yeah, I think we could. I think anything is open, but typically I think so usually in tutoring, there's like say 1 or 2 tutors assigned to a school, each school, and then the kids usually come one at a time for 45 minutes and leave. So yeah, I think any space that's open and ventilated or that gives, that provides distance could work. So no, like I said, this is something that the teachers just brought up in terms of just being, because obviously some of the research is indicating it's safer to be outside. And so some of them, but yeah, I'm open to all suggestions, but yeah, certainly that could work.
I was gonna say, if we're delineating between summer program versus the fall, September when full school fully reopens, spacing in numbers isn't going to be an issue for the summer program. It's about making sure we have protocols, PPE, and even classroom spaces would work, as David said, at small numbers. When we get to the fall, that's a different, then we have to talk about using all spaces, auditoriums, libraries, gymnasiums, absolutely.
Any further questions for David? I am seeing none. And we'll give Kim a try.
Let's try.
Thank you, David.
So I took off my video to hopefully help my connection, because it's definitely been funny tonight. I don't know if it's because of the fire, or not the fire, but the thunderstorm. So I apologize that you have to look at the seagulls. But now that it's kind of a trademark, and I did try to get rid of it, and everybody told me when I got rid of it to put it back on. So I'm going to try to give you some information around the planning group and our progress so far. When this all started, as I said at the last meeting, we broke into different subgroups, knowing that there was an enormous task ahead of us, and it really required expertise from all different areas. In saying that, the particular group that I was in charge of was just that reopening group. And what we basically did is set timelines and goals along the way so that we had a plan in place, or at least 3 different plans in place by the end of July. We're just about almost, 2 weeks or so, not even 2 weeks, a week and a little bit over a week. And I feel like we've made some really great progress. Up to this point, what we've done is we've kind of reviewed lessons learned over our past experience with the remote learning. We've also been able to receive some additional information from some outside agencies around the social and emotional well-being of the students. We use that information to develop kind of some specifics to an in-person plan. It is missing some of the pieces to the puzzle, and we're waiting from the state to give us further guidelines, but we certainly have some must-dos for every single school as far as what needs to be in place for an in-school situation, and then also what schools will have some autonomy over. So as we developed that, we used the lens of, again, that social and emotional piece, as well as the equity piece. We felt like that was the most important part of this whole planning in order for it to make a successful transition. The other thing that we've been able to unpack and start to plan for is basically starting this transition back to school much earlier than the first day of school for students. So what that means is providing professional development to teachers and parents and students. That's going to be offered throughout the summer in different capacities, mostly remote at this point. We have clear topics that emerge from our discussions, and as we move into a certain direction, whether it's social and emotional, instructional, or equity issues, we say, you know what, we really need to broaden people's understanding about that. That's something we need to put on our PD list. So we have an ongoing list. We've started to reach out to different consultants that we've worked in the past that we think would fulfill that need in a very successful way. So that PD plan is coming along. I would say it's probably about 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks from actually being published, so that when that list comes out for the month of August, people can pick and choose certain professional development. Now, that's not to say that when we go back to school and teachers are required to be there, there will certainly be PD that everybody will need to attend. But we certainly want to give the option, especially for parents, when we think about, again, going back to that, welcoming kids back has to happen much, much earlier than the first day of school, right? We know that kids have developed some habits over the summer or even during this remote learning time that's really going to ask them to shift. We know that kids have not been wearing masks. So how do we transition those families into, we don't wear masks anywhere, to, okay, now those masks have to be worn for a certain amount of time? We also know kids' sleeping habits have been somewhat yeah, she's Gailey shaking her. Yep. So that, you know, waking up early in the morning is not going to be the same as waking up at noon. So again, thinking about these little things, but they are going to have a major impact if we start to try to make this transition overnight. We just can't do that. We also need to educate parents about how to have conversations about anxiety or stress or anything else that might be bubbling up. So we're looking at a 3-part series in August that would be geared towards the elementary parents as well as middle and high school parents, knowing that there's different audiences and certainly different content that needs to be addressed. So really thinking about, I think, Narissa, you said it great about what are the gaps, what can we see or anticipate are going to be the issues, and let's try to address them in advance. So again, that PD plan is going to be probably done, I would say, within the next 2 weeks. We already have a good base to that. We have like I said, all of the details, as many details as we can have into what an in-person plan would include and what are the necessary components. So that's all written out. Today we actually have 64 people now on this group. So it gets a little stressful in breaking folks out, but it really does lend itself. And just to kind of piggyback to Narissa, that Kaylee, we have had such great input from the students at the high school that are on the committee as well as the parents. So it's really added a different perspective to our planning sessions, and it brought us to places that we just wasn't in our preview. So again, just the value of having a diverse group of people on board, it has been an amazing experience. So today we took those plans for in-person. We went through another series of checks to look at kind of that social and emotional piece and how do we support them, again, prior to that first day of school. We're starting to collect names of students that we know already have anxiety or school avoidance issues, or based on our tracking system, were not successful in the remote learning for various reasons, and starting to reach out to those students and make early connections with them. So again, we're in touch with them starting in August early on and building those relationships. So that particular group, we had a couple groups, like I said, that specialized in those areas and really looked at our in-person plan and started to tease out and add additional information, which was great. And then the other group actually reviewed probably, I think it was like 4 or 5 remote learning plans that they came back to the larger group and recommended. They went through pros and cons, and now we have a potential hybrid plan that we're working to develop a schedule for each school. So that should be done by next week as far as a preliminary draft of what a schedule could look like. So certainly making some headway there. And I think what I'm excited about, well, I don't want to use the word excited, but is that through this process, we've really developed some strong criteria about what that schedule needs to have in place in order to support kids' social and emotional, and again, that equity issue. So all of those components are going to be wrapped into that schedule, which I think is going to be much more student-oriented, and again, hopefully addressing some of the needs or issues prior to them bubbling up. Let's see. As far as our ability to kind of communicate. I think one of the things that's going to be really helpful moving forward is the Q&A guide that Brian has developed, because even in the working group, and these people have access to kind of some of the reference materials that superintendents are using, and there's still some misconceptions out there. So really want to make sure that people understand the situation. And then there's also just misinformation that's getting circulated that, again, will raise the level of anxiety of people. So really trying to come out strong with different platforms that we can communicate what is actually happening, what's real, what is not real. And then, it is always changing. So it's kind of like putting pieces together of a puzzle, but you're missing a whole bunch of them. So until we get those pieces, we can't complete this picture, but we certainly have a lot of the edge pieces together and feel fairly confident moving forward. We did also talk, I think it was somebody in this group was talking about 504 breaks and different kids who have the need to get up and move around. And so we talked about that today, again, looking at those specific cases where what do we do? And we talked about looking at the 504s who need, those motor breaks and getting them stand-up desks, getting them the rubber tubing that goes underneath the desk, so kids can have that kind of that physical movement when they need to, even though they may or may not be able to walk around a classroom. So really taking that dive into setting up the structure and time for, again, way before the first day of school, where we're unpacking the IEPs, the 504, and say, in this setting, looking at this IEP, are we able to implement and give that child what he or she needs in order to be successful? And if not, we need to pivot and change to make sure that the environment and the supports are there. And again, our goal is to do it way before the first day of school. So trying to find those gaps or those particular issues that might bubble up. We also talked about how do we get kids ready and to their new learning environment. And in the past, we've used the PBIS system, which works really well because it's an explicit way for at the elementary and middle school, and it can also be used at the high school level, where you're teaching kids and practicing certain behaviors and routines, and this would be on a platform or a structure that they're already familiar with. They're familiar with PBIS, but instead of learning the rules that would be in place in a typical setting, they're going to be using and practicing rules that are new within the setting that we are in right now. So again, that would address that. We talked about the potential of the schedule changing, and we have not that piece of that puzzle we still don't have in our hands yet. We think we're almost there, but just talking about the potential of having kids start and do a half day so that they can come in and instead of for 6 hours and really, again, try to get them in the school in a way that is going to be successful, so that that transition process is not a, here have a full day here, but a slow transition where they get to see their teachers and practice some of these safety routines. And then even having open houses where they potentially would be invited to come in at a certain time, and they would be able to kind of see the way the hallways and the classrooms are set up. They would, meet their teacher with the masks on. And so again, just getting them acclimated to the situation to reduce that anxiety. So when the first day, our goal is so that when that first day comes, there are no surprises. The kids absolutely, and the parents, know what to expect, and that we've thought of everything. So again, we have that initial kind of first layer of that plan for in-person. We certainly are in the, have identified a hybrid plan that we think is going to be successful for everybody. It has not yet, we can't confirm that. It still has to just be approved by the leadership and management and school committee, because I'm not quite sure of the process as we get these passed along, but they're feeling pretty good about the plan that they chose. So there's tons of stuff I could go on about. There certainly was a lot of different questions that were asked, either through the meeting or through this meeting or through emails, and we certainly write those down. And then it's great because that they're identifying certain gaps that may or we may not be in our preview. So it gives us an opportunity to have those discussions and then think strategically and thoughtfully about how we can overcome those obstacles. So the more questions that we have or concerns, I feel like the better prepared we can be to offer a environment that's safe and going to support our students socially and emotionally as well as academically. So I'll pause there, and I can answer any questions.
So can I just reiterate one thing, Kim, just real clear to make sure. So the group is still working on all 3 plans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one plan, all 3 scenarios. So just so that the committee's clear, even if we made a decision to pause and change direction, we have to be ready for all 3. So the working group is taking them methodically. The easiest from a teaching standpoint is bringing everyone in. Operationally, and on the operations and kind of facility side, that can be the most challenging. Remote is the easiest from an operations standpoint, but obviously the most challenging from an academic standpoint. And so then the hybrid is going to, the kind of middle ground there. So just to make sure that's clear, that the group isn't landing on any one, they're developing plans for each of these scenarios, fully back, fully out, or a hybrid of day on, day off, week on, week off. So just make sure that was clear.
All right. Thank you, Kim and Brian. So I know last time this was where pretty much all the questions came from. So what I'm going to do is the same thing as we did last time. We'll start with one committee member and they'll ask their question, get a response, and then anyone else who has a similar question, something along the same vein, let's handle all those at the same time before we switch topics so that we're not bouncing back and forth. So we're going to start with Linda, who I think was the first hand I saw.
First, I just want to say that I think it's great to see that we have 64 people that are in this group. It just means that our community is engaged and cares about what's going on in our schools. The question I have, Kim, is you talked about the gaps for the kids that you perceive are going to have the most issues, and you're going to have those kids come in early. But with having all of our students being out of school for so long, you might have more children that have gaps than you're realizing. Is there going to be some assessment or something at the beginning of school that's going to happen so that you have a baseline to
So when I'm speaking of gaps, Linda, I'm thinking about just areas that we have not paid any attention to as far as our planning. But we speak on it most often about gaps in academic learning and that piece of it. So I can address the pieces. I think you're talking about the academic pieces with gaps, that piece.
Yes.
Yes, so there's going to be a benchmark assessment, which we decided to not give, which we usually do fairly early on. But right now, our goal is to bring the kids back and get them to feel comfortable and at ease in their learning environment. So we're looking in the 3rd week to administer the benchmark, obviously the iReady and the math one, K through 8. And then at the high school, we still haven't identified a benchmark assessment for them. Some of them wanted to do assessments that are related to their particular content, and we need to kind of unpack that a little bit to see what that would look like. But we absolutely are going to be assessing for math as well as for reading. But those assessments will not start until, I would say, the 3rd week of that. Right now, we're saying the 3rd week of school. If for some reason the transition is taking longer or there's more issues, we could push that off. Again, just knowing that we have to be flexible. Right now, it's scheduled for the 3rd week. And then obviously follow up to that could be there will be intervention groups to support those kids who do have gaps. We're looking at after school tutoring. We have a couple grants that we can shift and use some of those resources to address those gaps. And we also talked about summer tutoring as well. So again, planning ahead to think about opportunities that we can use outside of school to address some of those academic needs. But with that, like I said, our first priority is definitely that social and emotional, because if you have kids who are anxious and nervous, and I don't know, the back to school, I can't picture a third grader sitting in a row for that many hours and trying to instruct in a way that's engaging and developmentally appropriate. So again, our goal, social and emotional, and then assessments, and then address those gaps.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. I'm also concerned with, I think every student, whether they're in kindergarten or all the way up to high school, is going to have social and emotional issues regarding this whole thing.
I know. I'm going to have social and emotional issues regarding this.
I myself have that as well. Just being in the workplace, we have it at the workplace as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions on kind of, I guess, anything Linda touched on there, either academic progress, initial assessments, or I think social emotional is a big topic. We'll probably end up coming back to that one, but I guess we could handle a tangent there as well if we needed to. I see, Kaylee, go ahead.
So I know personally from the high school aspect, we're all trying to prepare for colleges, but we don't even know if it's going to be the same 3 months from now or 2 years from now when I'm going to school. So I know we've talked a lot about the elementary and middle school aspects of how we're going to be testing and learning, but personally, I know my grade has always been the guinea pig grade, which fits here too. We were the ones with Park, we were switching around there, but I know a lot of people I've talked to have been worried about not being able to make up for the information that we had lost because our classes in the high school aren't necessarily in order of anything. It's we have this science class, but then we're in chemistry one year, biology the next. We might take a fun ecology class. Everything bounces so far around in the high school that I know a lot of people are worried about being able to meet benchmarks, not when they're in Triton specifically, but more once we move on to college, because that's what they always tell us at the high school level, is that the goal is to prepare as many of us for the future as possible. And for a lot of us, that comes through college. So how are we going to, have we stopped to think about that? Or I just wanted to ask where that's going, if there's any.
Right. So I think, interesting enough, I think when you think about benchmarking for the K even through 8th grade, we think about kind of learning how to read in a sense where you can read narrative, you can read expository text, and you can fully grasp the meaning behind that material. As you get into, like you said, the high school, it gets more focused on content areas, right? So you could have had a class and it was one and done, and then the next semester you take another class and the content might not be related at all. You're obviously still using your reading and your writing skills. And then even with math, I think we have to really identify the areas that are going to be most impacted. And I would think it would be in the math area. When you look at summer learning loss, regardless of what age, that we know that math seems to be more devastating than reading, because just by our living in the world that we do, we can read, we can see print everywhere. Where math, that's not such a natural experience. So I think really looking at those particular areas in math, potentially some of the sciences, and thinking about how can we address those needs and shift potentially some of that material to another course where one builds upon the other. I can tell you the Department of Ed has cautioned us, and again, I can understand their viewpoint of this, about going back and teaching material that was not taught in the past, instead of kind of moving forward with new material and then stopping to scaffold or reteach when it's needed, instead of following like a linear, like we stopped here in March and we're going to pick up the curriculum and move forward, and then come December we're going to start where you are, because at that point you'll never be caught up. But I do think that regardless where you are, there is always going to be an impact of this epidemic, right? There's pandemic. I mean, it's would not be right for me to say as a senior or a junior, and my daughter's a senior or was a senior, to say that this is not going to impact her college and being ready for that. Like, we hope that in time she will be able to develop those skills throughout her learning, but it is going to take some time to get to that point where you feel comfortable. But I would say math is the one area that we really need to focus in at the high school level, and even the middle school, actually all levels, to make sure that any of that prerequisite learning is in place.
All right. Any other questions on assessments, academic preparedness? Okay, Caitlin?
Hi, I just have a quick question, Kim. How are we, well, are you keeping in preschool to 8th, let's say, because high school is a different ball game? Are you keeping kids classically the way they chose teachers previously before the shutdown? Or is there talk, I know there's been cohorts and all that, are you going to move them around based on those assessments, or leave them and just use it as information to move forward?
So are you talking about like intervention groups and splitting the kids up that way?
Well, just as a whole, once you do the assessment, will you like rearrange classrooms to best fit needs, or will you just do response to interventions? And
So you know what, there's been a couple ideas as far as like flexible grouping, so that if we have kids and we've done this in the past just within a classroom itself, so that we want to obviously expose them to the grade level curriculum, but some of the groups might be working at a slower pace because they do have to revisit some of the skills. So I think that is truly going to be something that we've done in the past and that we will continue to do, and might expand if we need to do that, because otherwise it's going to be very challenging to meet all of the needs and the level of scaffolds that are needed throughout the school.
Okay.
And I would say too, preschool and kindergarten, I know there was some questions about that. I'm meeting separately with the preschool teachers and the principals just to kind of tease out some of the things, because I do think that they have a different situation, and also just waiting to hear from the state regarding it's not a requirement that they wear masks, and then does that change that amount of distancing too? So yeah, that is one area that we have not had an opportunity to really unpack, just because it is a novel situation.
Does that answer your question, Caitlin?
I'm just thinking, like, classrooms were chosen, let's say, the previous year. You know, the teachers met and kids got placed. Will those placements change? And with the current guideline where you can't move kids as easily as you did in the past, is there kind of a plan to streamline it in a way?
So we're not going to do any tracking per se, so it's going to be heterogeneously grouped again, but any type of separation within that classroom would be small groups and based on that specific need. We did talk about the potential of looping, so some of the ideas that some of the districts have been entertaining is the class that you had and the teacher that you had previously would move to the next grade, and there's certainly research that supports that, especially in the younger grades. That would have been a contractual issue, and not everybody was able and even willing to do that, because that would require a whole new set of curriculum, and we've got so many other new initiatives, not even initiatives, a new curriculum and learning environments and other things to deal with that might not be the best time to do it, but still heterogeneously grouped, Caitlin, and then within those heterogeneously grouped classrooms, breakout groups based on specifically where those benchmark tests showed as areas of need. And we'll address and progress monitor. I'm a big progress monitor piece because I feel like if something's not working, we need to know, and we need to know sooner as opposed to later. And that's the other thing we've ordered a couple different intervention math kits that the math specialists have been reviewing. So again, we're building up our resources so that anticipating, and those are kind of the things that I think about when Narissa says gaps for this, anticipating that math is going to be an area that we struggled with somewhat before this. We were making some headway with that, but this is potentially going to put us back a little bit. So how are we going to address that? What's the best way to address that? What's the research out on some of the top intervention programs? What professional development needs to happen? So again, thinking of all of these things even before school starts. And I'm just going to add too is that we have a program out there for K through 6th grade. It's called ST Math. I think I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, and we do have a lot of parents who are accessing that free platform. And we have over 100 people using or at least signed up for iReady. I haven't had a chance to go on and see what the usage rates are, but parents are involved, which I think, again, I always try to look for some of the positives of this. I think parents have a better sense of where their children are academically and where they struggle, probably more than they want to know. But they're definitely invested in their kids' education. So that was the highest rate we've ever got for summer support and resources that folks wanted.
All right, other questions on academic assessments, expectations for the fall? Seeing none, I'll move on to a fresh topic. Maureen, you're up next.
I guess mine is sort of about expectations for the fall, but and it would sort of go in line with whether if we were moving forward with an in-person or some sort of hybrid. I know Desi said that every district has to create one plan, but is there any flexibility when it comes to, I mean, you're looking at a kindergartner and how a kindergartner can learn and how a 12th grader can handle school. Is there any flexibility in possibly bringing the littler ones in the elementary level in for shorter day and letting the older grades have a more full day?
So is that in an in-person, or are you considering a hybrid or somewhere?
I mean, definitely in person, but if even with a hybrid, I think you could, could you do that for a hybrid as well? Like, I just think about, I think it was Paul Goldner that said, little second grader sitting in a row for hours on end. I mean, I just can't see that. And I'm wondering, is there any flexibility to say to those elementary level students that, okay, you can, we're going to offer in-person instruction from, whatever, 8 a.m. to.
Mm-hmm. So unless and Brian, you can jump into, again, that's one of those pieces to the puzzle that we don't have right now. They haven't relaxed any of the regulations regarding time on learning. So we don't have that flexibility yet, but I would say with the hybrid model that we're looking at, we would have fewer kids in the classroom. And so there would be potential for more movement and less restriction because there would be more space. You wouldn't be just taking bodies and sitting them in a chair for 6 hours. There would definitely be some more opportunities to go outside. We talked about that. You know, they're really encouraging to plan as much outside activities and lessons that you possibly can, which is great. And that, you know, recesses can look very similar to what they do today. So with that in mind, I think in a hybrid model, it would be much easier to create those movement breaks and activities where it wouldn't be as restrictive if you were bringing everybody back, for sure.
Yeah, so the next, well, we were talking with the superintendents yesterday at whatever, 2:30, got an email that the commissioner scheduled a call for tomorrow at 11 a.m. Haven't had a call since last week. Sometimes the calls are, hey, here's a couple answers to a couple questions. Hoping there's a little bit more clarity that's come out of some of the recent discussions. Kind of a couple of the huge linchpin. We keep talking about these kind of key decisions. So transportation guidance, we still have nothing in regards to transportation, which obviously is a huge impact on both cost and getting kids to and from school. Second kind of a key linchpin discussion is the time on learning, getting out to what you're asking, Maureen. So our requirement in the state is 180 days and an hour, so 990 hours at the secondary level for time on learning. So that there's been discussion, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Ed gave the commissioner the authority to relax the number of required days from 180 to 177. Secondary to that, some states just have hours, and whether you do it over 160 days or 180 days, that's up to the local district. So we've got both the 180-day requirement plus the hours. There's been discussion about relaxing the hours. I have less certainty that will be relaxed. I'm fairly confident now that the 180 is going to be relaxed to 177. That those numbers were specifically talked about with the Board of Ed. So certainly we would decide what to do with those 3 days. Plan will be to put those at the beginning of the year, use them for teacher training, setting up classrooms, whether that's physical setup as well as, you know, preparation and preparing for remote, hybrid, or what have you. So those are two key pieces. The other piece is a potential for a statewide self-paced remote platform that would allow us on a fee subscription-based, per pupil subscription-based format, provide parents with the option to say, if you choose to want a fully remote setup, right now the only option parents can legally choose is to say they're going to homeschool. That's obviously very burdensome on a parent, and there's many parents who do it, but it requires purchasing a curriculum, being the teacher. Obviously in a remote model, we remain the teachers, we remain the educational, the responsibility lies with us. This other option would allow us, a family, to choose, or however the format would be, we don't know details, but it's in the works, allow that remote option that would be similar to, we currently use Fuel Ed, which if there's a student who can't be in the school at the high school and needs to take a course, we can have them take the course through Fuel Ed. It's got the own instructors and all that. So that would obviously change things in regards to what we can offer to parents, to say, hey, I get it. You know, if it's a choice, here's a choice you can make, versus something where you may not have a documented reason why your child can't be in school. And then finally, the other kind of key piece that there's been discussion about and we're waiting for, and it impacts the question you asked, Maureen, is setting different expectations for different grade levels, right? So 2 weeks, so up until Thursday, the 25th, when we had those guidelines released, we were being told that don't do too much planning, because this is going to be 90% directive. You are going to get a plan, and here's what you're going to have to do. That changed, obviously, and most recently last week, I will quote the commissioner in saying the only directive in this plan is the medical restrictions. Obviously, we have Worcester, we have Lexington going the other way and not using the 3 feet, backing up to 3 feet and focusing on hybrid. So this still all needs to be teased out in regards to what is a directive, what do we have to do, what do we have the ability to determine locally. But those key pieces about, could we have a shorter day for the younger kids? Could we bring in younger kids on a hybrid and have, or vice versa, and not have remote or hybrid at the secondary level. So again, it was supposed to be one universal platform for the entire district. We were going to direct, was the message, until June 25th. And then it's been an ebb and flow since June 25th in regards to what the directives are. So I'm hopeful that maybe tomorrow, if we can check one of those boxes, I'd be thrilled. Especially if it was the time on learning and the 180, 177 days, because we could then again clarify for parents, make some decisions about the actual calendar and the first day of school. Is that going to get pushed back? And again, start to give parents facts and not, speak in hypotheticals, but speak with certainty about some specific plans. So I don't know if that answers the question entirely, but yeah. We're certainly getting the sense we'll have a little flexibility in regards to differentiating by grade level.
All right, so I kind of feel like that one blew up, but I'm going to say, if your question is about structure of the school day, a universal remote learning model, or potentially differences between schools and or different grades and how they would be treated, this is now a good time to start. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Does anyone have questions along there? Kaylee?
So I have a few, I'm sorry. My first question is, for the logged hour requirement, does it have to be in-person instruction the way that it's written, or could it just be that it was shown that we were doing educational work online actively for that given period?
So pre-pandemic, it was absolutely in person.
Okay.
It was even prescribed what you were doing in person, right? So this was going to be the last year of Blizzard bags.
Yep.
Districts that chose that. So technically, yes, it's in person. Obviously, we're living in the post-pandemic world now, or post-pandemic kind of reframing of things. And so certainly there's an argument to say that remote learning is time on learning part of that 990. Yes, that is a base assumption. We have to test that specifically about, if we get creative in regards to what is actual time on, or what is actually happening during that remote learning. Because obviously it may take you 4 hours to do your work, and it may take someone else 6 hours to do their work. But what do we assume, 4 or 6? What's the right number? So there's definitely some, I think it's we're only going to get to the dilemma of the hours if we talk about shortened days, right? If we're talking about a remote day, in-person day, and it's a traditional day, I think there's not a lot to unpack and dissect. If we start to have students come in late, if we have to stagger, right? If we have to bus all students and can ride them at 25% capacity, and we've got to stagger start times and stagger dismissal times, then obviously that changes the actual hours in the day. So I think as long as we keep the regular schedule and just say in or out, it's all time on learning.
Did you have more, Kaylee?
Yeah,
you have more along that line. You can keep on going.
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure before I continued which way it was already technically written. I know it had been mentioned earlier that we were considering doing I know Kim had mentioned half days at the start of the possibility of a hybrid. To work into it. Sorry, I know I just cut out for a minute.
Yeah, we lost you in the middle
of that. We can hear you now.
I
Okay.
think your last sentence.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi is a little bit spotty right now because of the storm. So I know Kim had mentioned that if in the hybrid model there's talk of potentially starting off with half days and working back into longer hours. My question was on that note, because to address the fact that a lot of people's sleep schedules have been destroyed because of the current pandemic. If we had considered, instead of doing morning half days, if we had considered doing afternoon half days, going towards the normal end of a school day, and then as we working towards earlier, as opposed to just starting early and working towards longer days.
We have not brought that point up, but I just want to clarify that the half days would be regardless of what, I mean, obviously, if right now we're planning to go back with everybody, and those half days would be applicable to that plan, to all of the plans really, just about getting kids acclimated. I have not talked about doing an afternoon instead of a morning. So we can certainly bring that up to the working group and find out what the pros and cons would be.
It's also been a day or day or two. It's
I
not, you
wasn't
know,
sure how far
weeks
that
of
plan
half
was.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, it was basically
No, yeah.
2. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, in the beginning period, I just wasn't sure how far along that plan had
Yeah, and I would think the
developed
other
yet.
thing to consider is too that the half days, it would have to be the same for the elementary level kids, as well as the middle schools, which we always talk about. They're on reverse schedules, right? The little ones get up early and then they're tired by the time the high school kids are getting up and they're ready for a nap or a snack or whatever. So again, we just have to, whatever we do, we have to think about that there are different groups.
Of course. And then on the structure content, I know when I was a student, we took the 6th graders and brought them into the middle school for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Does that still occur, or was that just something of the past? Before, pre-COVID, I mean.
I know we had a few students come in. Did you do everybody, or you just had a few? I think we called them scouts. Was that what it was called? You had a couple of scouts that shadowed some kids around?
No, when I was in the system, in 6th grade, they brought everyone from all the different elementary schools to the middle school for a day.
Oh, yeah. The spring. Yeah.
The spring.
Yes.
I was wondering, since that didn't happen, do we have a plan to bring in the upcoming 7th graders? Because with the whole, you're only going to be able to go certain ways in hallways and time
Great question.
constraints between getting places, if we had thought about how we're going to even introduce them to the school, because they missed that whole part. Because I know that there's students that missed that one thing. And
no, I mean, that's an excellent suggestion. I know we talked about doing a locker night and some of those other traditional kind of orientation activities. I know, I'm not quite sure what has been decided about that yet, but I love that idea.
Yeah. So the step up day in the spring, the PTA's paid for that, sponsored that. I think I just saw someone commented that in this comment. I know it's not supposed to be someone else, but that's been a great event. That's, it's ebbed and flowed over the years, but there's no way to replicate that. Great point, Kaylee. I mean, that the power of that is everyone being social and meeting people, me from Rowley, meeting someone from Newbury and from Salisbury, and making a friend, making a connection. So
definitely.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to replicate that, but absolutely, Mr. McCrae and Mrs. Monjo have been talking about locker night and that 7th grade orientation week, and trying to find creative ways to replicate some part of that, whether it be a staggered locker night, and that doesn't address the social question of meeting other kids necessarily, but it at least gets you in the building, gets you to find where your locker might be.
I may comment it along the aspect of like, this is where this class is.
Yeah.
Aspect.
Yeah.
And I would just mention too that thinking of that kind of that social piece, one of the plans for the in-person, actually all levels, but it was brought up by the middle school, is how do we build community and a sense of belonging as we bring kids together from different schools who have never had that opportunity to have that gathering in the spring. And it was really important for their schedule to include opportunities for community building in whatever shape or form that looks like in this particular environment. But again, I love the fact that they were thinking about that, and again, looking at that as that's a potential gap that we need to fill that. And so it's certainly going to be part of their planning as far as the schedule goes, which is good.
Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, and that's that kind of, because I thought this was great, is that at the high school level, even giving kids opportunity to socialize in a safe way, so that they're not just, if they're moving from classroom to the lunchroom, or however they're staggering those transitions, is to make sure that they have time to socialize, because that's the piece that's going to ground them, and that's where they're going to get their kind of their strength from, is those connections that they make with their peers and their teachers. So we really have to be mindful of those situations, and they can't just happen by chance. It has to be somewhat part of their everyday, at least for the first couple of weeks, and then some.
All right. Other questions on structure? Anything along that line? Not seeing any. All right. Kaylee, go ahead.
Sorry, my video is acting up, so I'm going to shut that off again. But my last question was, it's less of the structure of the actual school day, but I was wondering how the groups for these were actually picked. Because you said that you had a 60 people, but where's this demographic?
So we have teachers, we have guidance counselors, we have social workers, we have principals, assistant principals, the district team is on there. We have students, 2 students that we were given names from. I think they were from the student council Patrick had given us. We have parents that were, we have a CPAC representative, we have school council representatives, so which each kind of governing group, whether we're talking student council, parent groups, we tried to pull representation from them. We have our EL teacher in there. I'm trying to think who else. Yeah, so that's if they're in the district. We also have OT in there as well. I'm just trying to think. There's a lot. So yeah, teaching and learning coordinators. Yep.
Yeah, you had just referred to it like the students and parents. So I just was wondering where they had come from.
Yeah, that's where they came from. And part of the people were invited, and other ones, there was a kind of an email put out. And we also have TRTA is represented in that group as well, which we've kind of asked for the things that we want to put in place to support our students. If they could kind of put a tab of what things may or may not need to be negotiated, but I don't think right now we have anything on that list. So far so good, I think.
I will note too that Sue Densmore, who's the president of TRTA, which is the Triton Regional Teachers Association, reached out this week to just start talking about that with the Personnel and Negotiation Subcommittee. So Brian and Paul Lees are going to start working on pulling some dates together for that. And that group will also include Maureen Heffernan and Paul Goldner for that negotiation, which will be happening over the summer.
Yeah, I think that'll become a more vibrant discussion once we have more clarity about exactly what the fall's going to look like, so we know what we're negotiating around.
Right.
For sure. Paul Goldner, did you have a question about structure and all that, or was yours a new
Yes. Yeah, sorry, it was about structure.
Go for it.
And it is back related to that difference in what the day might look like for the younger kids and the older kids, especially in a hybrid model. I know Amherst Pelham just put out their plan for a hybrid model, and it had different amounts of time in the building for the younger kids and the older kids. And thinking about rates of transmission, it seems like teens are more susceptible than the younger kids, but also the social emotional piece. Older kids get a lot of their connectivity from things like sports teams or drama, the play productions, whatever that is, where the younger kids get a lot of their connectivity from imaginary play and pickup games on the playground during recess. So I just feel like those structures and what the needs are so different. So are we thinking about different ways of having the children in the building during the hybrid model? or amount of time of having them in the building during the hybrid model?
Yeah, so I think I love that idea. We just have not entertained that thought yet, just because we're waiting for guidance. So, but once we have a green light, or we have given that the thought that we can certainly have some flexibility, then we will definitely revisit that or visit that option.
All right, other questions on structure? Not seeing any. Kim, I just had a couple of my own, and I think this first one goes along with Paul Goldner's question, but has there been any thought put, especially if there's a relaxation on number of hours, to having staggered starts so that so that some students could have some really specialized attention, either, so if you had, for instance, I don't even know how you divide up those groups, but if you had them coming in on different bus loads because of bus run numbers and issues, or even just wanted to kind of ease the transitions, which honestly, I think as far as hard as it will be hard for students to sit at desks, I think staying apart in the hallway is going to be even harder. So anticipating trying to maybe drop the number of people that you have in a hallway at any given time. Has there been any thought about doing some sort of a staggered day to provide a little bit of ease on those, and a little bit more specialized instruction for smaller groups?
So are you talking about like in person, Narissa?
Yeah, yes. So this would be in person, either hybrid or a 100% classroom.
So again, I think it will depend on what they come back for as far as guidance with the buses and the transportation issue. But that is absolutely certainly something we could entertain and discuss as more information becomes more available to us.
Okay.
Certainly, absolutely.
All right. That was one question. Another question, which I think kind of goes to the structure of the day, was kind of this idea, and I think this probably goes to facilities a little as well, maybe, is transportation, and whether you're including on your surveys about students intending to ride a bus, or intending to get dropped off, or having some other mode of transportation into the school. And then I think along with that goes that concept of kind of the screening questions, dare I call them. I don't even know what they're calling them in the guidance. I don't recall. But just that idea of have you had any symptoms in the last, X hours.
Yeah, so that'll be, so the transportation will be one of those things as we have a finite plan, absolutely, where we would say, are you going to put your child on a bus? And, the guidance alludes to the fact that we might be able to do something that is illegal to do, which is basically plan for just those who say they want transportation. So that's certainly absolutely kind of a further down the road survey when we're getting to more finite details. And then theoretically that question, right, so it's the same as a return to work, where you're basically self-certifying that, I don't know if you've gone to the doctor or the dentist, they come out, take your temperature and ask you 72 questions that you haven't been around anyone, in the last 2 days, 14 days, the whole questionnaire. That would be up until the moment of, because theoretically that's supposed to happen every day. So we're not going to ask the questions every day. And, there's been a question of whose job is it to do that? Because, we're not going to ask the bus driver to ask those questions, because if there's 3 kids at the bus stop and there's no parents around, and one student says, well, yeah, my dad's sick, the bus driver is not going to leave that student sitting there on the side of the road. So there's still lots of questions about how exactly we manage that, but that's supposed to be in real time each day that we would be communicating to say, basically, you need to do this in your home every day and only send students if you answer no on all these questions.
Okay, so we don't see that as an interest thing. That would be more of a, I don't know how you're envisioning that right now, but that's not going to be at the point of entry is what you're saying.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So originally the question, yes, it was buying thermal scanners and, right, it was taking temperatures, and that's fallen way back to be something that it's simply a matter of it would take, even if we staggered, it would take hours to bring kids into school if we were stopping and having to ask them those, 7 questions every day. So it's moved to placing the onus on the families. And then obviously lots of questions of DESE to say, how do we deal with that? Because, right, I mean, we deal with it now when the nurse is talking to a student who isn't feeling well about 1 o'clock, and they say, well, yeah, I wasn't feeling great this morning, but I got some Tylenol and I was feeling better. So, so it's going to be a challenge.
And I think I just want to, as far as the planning, like, we can only plan based on the information that we have today. So even when we have better scenarios, we don't know if we can actually implement those, such as like a staggered start, which I love the idea, and everybody else did, but we really tried to focus on the information that we have now, and given our objective, what can we do? Because I think that's the challenging part, is basically to say to these 60 people, we can break out and do all these different groups and develop all these really great plans, only to be told 2 weeks from now, oh, guess what, everybody, we're going to go back to giving you 95% of your must do and all of the plans in place. And then we're left like, okay, and just somewhat confused. So it's always that balancing act to giving people some concrete information, but doing so with limited information to work with, and maybe not creating the best situation because we don't have all of the pieces to put together. But we also feel the urgency to give folks some idea of the work and the progress that that we have been moving through along. And I think some of the biggest ideas that we know are strong, and really, regardless of what happens in the end, is that we want to really take care of our kids as far as that social and emotional piece. And we certainly want to provide professional development and support for parents, students, and teachers throughout this transition process, which in my mind really starts in August, not the day before school starts. So again, just bringing those kind of key principles to whichever plan as we shift and we pivot throughout this process. So we certainly, like I said, have principles for us that are really strong, that we will be able to integrate into any plan that becomes our final draft.
Okay, thank you. All right, other questions on this before we move along? Linda?
I had a question about lockers. How are you social distancing lockers?
It's a great question.
Yeah, either need to be use lockers and schedule times when students can be there to make sure, obviously, they're well within 6 feet and certainly within 3 feet. So it's either there's recommendations to not use them, or to be able to stagger them in a way so students can only go specific times. And we know, locker 101, 105, 109, that they have specific times when they can be there. So they're, students are 3-4 lockers away. So it has to be structured. The entire day has to be structured. When it comes down to it, Kyle and I were on a call this morning. There's a whole parametric model that the state has put together using MSBA data to basically plug in your school and square footage, and it models out specifically whether you can achieve this 3-foot radius. So as I was saying, if we were bringing in perfectly still little robots and plucking them in, placing them in a classroom, and they stayed there for 6.5 hours, that model works beautifully, because you can keep your 2 to 3 foot personal space buffered by anywhere from 3 to 6 feet of physical distance. But when someone gets up to go to the bathroom, when we're bringing kids in and out, so as we're mapping these out, we actually have to map entry and egress. We have to map flows of how students are moving, whether students can keep desks or bags on one side of the desk, because if I'm sitting in an armchair in a high school and I might be 3 feet apart, but then I lean over, I'm grabbing my bag next to me, I'm instantly 1.5 feet away from the person next to me. So, the guidance was very clear that the 3 feet is an absolute minimum. So that's again, easy to achieve when students are still. But when you have a high school of 684 students walking around, we have to regulate literally every movement they make to be able to say that we're 3 to 6 feet apart.
And then the question's going to be, I'm right-handed and I'm left-handed.
Yep.
Hmm.
And nothing against left-handers, but yes, we're gonna have to figure that out.
All right, other questions on this before we move on? Seeing none. Mr. Lees, you are up next.
Kim, I'm just wondering, you would use the term equity a few times quite a while ago.
Mhm.
Are there being any special steps being taken to bring the SPED parents group in and meet with David during the summertime when they could kind of drill down on services that can be provided?
David, do you want to field that? I have not set anything up.
Yeah, so we have Alicia Davison as a CPAC chairperson. She's on this call. I can see her tonight. So we've had an initial meeting, and she is on the reopening group. So yeah, we can certainly have a CPAC meeting during the summer, and we had actually planned one later in the school year. So yeah, they're involved in the whole process.
Thank you, David. I saw Renee Toth's name, and that's what prompted it for me, the question. Kim, can you comment on the AAP report that we were provided?
The one from the pediatricians?
Yeah.
In what respect? Just, do I agree with it? Do I feel comfortable bringing the kids back?
Well, I guess we want to hit the high points, and there were 6 points in it. And the first one said that whatever policy is put together, the district has to be nimble and flexible.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't suggest necessarily that you wait for all this guidance and direction from the state. I think more favors putting together plans and being flexible so that when you receive the information, you're ready to pivot, to use your term.
Right.
I think, do you agree that the summary of the American Association of Pediatrics said that we should return to in-person schooling?
I'm going to take this one. So
Yeah.
the reality is,
Hold on.
No. The American Academy of Pediatrics has advice in this process. We
Yeah.
don't answer to the AAP. We answer to the Commissioner of Education and the governor. So it quite literally, if they said, make something up, if the commissioner uses that to support his opinion and what we have to do, then we have to do what the commissioner says. If he says it's going to be the opposite, then he obviously wouldn't have included that in the advice. But the AAP, I personally don't think it's the most sound medical opinion, but I'm not a medical expert. But the reality is that is the advice that the Commissioner of Education approved through the governor of the state of Massachusetts, issued the guidance that we've been told we have to follow. So it would be great, right, if we find out that the guidance is truly guidance, but up until 2 weeks ago, it wasn't guidance. And there are certainly districts that have jumped out and are releasing plans that don't follow the guidance, or at least kind of, push back on the guidance. So we could put a plan out, and there's one thing to be able to say we're being nimble and can pivot, but that's just flat out unfair to families to put out something that says, here's what we think we're going to do, and 2 weeks later change course. I get the frustration of not having the plan, but I don't want to plan for something that we're going to not be able to fulfill.
But Brian, the issue is not frustration with not having a plan. The frustration is with not working towards a plan with diligence. That's my concern. That's what we need to get past, is the notion that the state is going to change the game or change the rules. We need to get a plan in place, okay? I mean, that just has to happen, because if September comes and goes and we don't have our staff in place and we don't have a solid plan in place, we're going to be rudderless.
And I guess my question would be, what out of everything we've been saying, with a group of 50 that's now 64 that's been meeting weekly, that people are working on this around the clock, makes you think that we're not working towards a plan?
Well, it's just Kim's comment when she said that, we're working towards it, but we full well recognize that everything that we're doing could be set aside. And what I'm suggesting is we can't work that way. We need to work with diligence, get our plan put together, okay? And then if the state continues to provide guidance, we implement that guidance into the plan. Brian, I don't want to see us get caught in the fall without a good plan.
Right. So can I just interject? We absolutely have a plan. I just want people to know as they're working that they have to be flexible, because if I'm working with 60 people who are pouring into all of these hours, like I said, if you want, like I was saying to Brian today, just as an update, I said, I actually feel really good where we are in our timeline. I could create an in-person plan. I have all the information. I have everything that we've talked about and all of our top priorities. I have that. We just started with the hybrid plan. I have a good handle on that. The principals are working on schedules. I just want, again, if we talk about miscommunication, I want people in the group and everybody else to know we're going to submit some plans when they're ready, and do that in a way that's very thoughtful and really includes everything of our priorities. But if somebody out there is thinking that is going to be the final plan and we can stamp it and say it's ours, they're misunderstanding that we have to act a response to the state. So if the state comes in and says, you know what, at the final hour, everybody's remote plans, just your remote plans, we've actually come in with our own remote plan. We're just not in a situation where we can say, oh, thanks, but no thanks. We already have one. We worked on it for, how many weeks? Like, we just can't do that. And I just want people to understand that is the situation in which we lead. We are still focused. We have plans. We have two parts of the 3-part almost done, and that's within a very short amount of time and taking into consideration a lot of pieces. And then again, I think that's why we were limited, because we went on the information that we had. We did not wait. If we waited, we could be like, yeah, that's a good idea. And we still think it's a good idea. So when I say pivot and turn, if we're given more information, we're going to then, like you said, adjust that plan to include that information that's going to better help our students in the long run.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
so as we said earlier, the plan is, the commissioner keeps saying it's one plan with 3 options. We will have a plan. We have to be ready to submit that to the Department of Ed. So we will be ready to bring students back, and we'll be able to tell you, here's what we can do with 3 feet, here's what we can do with 4.5 feet or 6 feet, what a hybrid looks like, and what a fully remote model looks like. We have no choice but to have those in place, and we will. I have every confidence, and will stake my job on it, that we'll have that ready to go.
Me too.
Thanks for joining me.
Can we look for jobs? No, just kidding. I'm teasing. No, I do. I actually, last week, we were still collecting information, and I hadn't even had time to kind of unpack all the work that we had done previously. But this week, I definitely feel like within just that short amount of time, we are where we need to be with our guidelines. And after listening to the superintendents from some other districts, that we're in a good place, and I want to be proud of the plans. I don't want to just push out anything just to get it done. I really want to make sure that we put the kids at the center of the plan.
I think it's really important too, and this is just my perspective from having talked to a lot of different school committees, is it's really important to have all the key people involved in that planning process, because I think a lot of the districts that have come out with plans already,
Mm-hmm.
It was not a group process. It was I believe, probably administrative. I mean, it's always hard to tell on the outside looking in when you're talking to school committees, but sometimes I won't say it went out without their knowledge, but it went out without a lot of knowledge on it, without a lot of input in a lot of cases from different districts that are out there. And there are school committees that are very frustrated with their administration. And if there are school committees that are frustrated with their administration, I can only imagine that there are parents that are very frustrated with their administration, students that are very frustrated with their administration. Because if the people who have to live this day to day are not involved in making those decisions, then you don't come out with a livable plan, or a plan that people are invested in, as far as I'm concerned. And I hear that a lot as I'm talking to school committees around the state. So just perspective from the outside, I guess. All right, another big topic. I don't even know what to call this one. So, but I guess just general planning.
The open bucket.
The open bucket, exactly. Linda, go ahead.
Just like the governor, he didn't rush to open the state. we cannot rush the administration to rush the plan. I think everything has to be a
Uh-oh. I think we just lost you, Linda. I think she's totally frozen. All right. We'll hopefully come back to her in a
make
second.
sure.
Oh, there she is.
Oh,
we
man.
lost you. You totally froze up for a minute there. Can you just,
Oh.
sorry.
I was on a roll. Okay. I'm just saying that Governor Baker has taken his time to open the state in a methodical process. We have to do that with the plan that's being put in place. I think we have to take into consideration all the people that are on this committee and take all their perspectives into mind to make sure that we're doing what's right so that the teachers, the parents, the students feel safe. To ask you to rush this plan before you're ready to roll it out is unfair to everybody that's working so hard to get this done. No offense to you, Paul, but I think the administration's doing a fantastic job trying to get this stuff done. That's just my opinion.
Linda hit a roll there. Go ahead, Paul. Oh, I think you just muted yourself rather than unmuting. And you're mute. You're muted.
Which
Hang on.
Paul are you?
You're muted.
Can't hear you. Oh, sorry. I was going for Lee's because I think he was trying to just respond because they were having a back and forth. But he keeps muting and unmuting, and every time he unmutes, then he doesn't talk, and when he mutes, he does talk. So, you ready, Paul?
I think so.
All right, I can hear you now.
I think I may have misspoke, but I'm not rushing for a plan. I'm rushing for a plan for late August, September. I just don't want to lose teaching time and teaching days because we don't have a plan. I'm not asking for a plan now. And I said at the last meeting that any one of the three plans is totally suitable to me, depending upon what the state of the information is. So please don't mischaracterize what I'm saying, that I'm rushing for a plan next week, the week after that. I'm not. I just don't want to lose teaching time in the fall. That's all there is to it.
And it's a
That's
fair
fair.
concern. Yep. And we will not.
Anybody else have Paul Goldner, was your question on this? Yes. Same thing with you.
I'll wait.
There you go. Oh.
So I was saying, I'll wait. It's slightly different. I'll wait.
Different? Okay. Does anybody else have anything on this? Going through. Is that a Kaylee? Go for it.
I'd just like to say, especially to Kim and the group that she's working with, that I find it commendable that you are working at the most diligent pace possible to come up with an entire new school plan with the 55 days that you're given. And I think that we have to keep in mind that they're being asked to completely rewrite how education is undergoing right now. So I just want to say thank you for all the hard work.
I'll second that.
Yes. The group is doing a tremendous amount of work, and it doesn't kill anyone more than me when I made that, what I thought was a promise that we would, right at the last day of school, to say, you know, we're hoping for the guidance and we'll get you some solid information by early July. Everyone truly believed, I truly believed, that we'd be able to give some solid information. So we're just going to do our best to, anytime we can call a fact a true fact, we're gonna roll it out and let families know.
All right. Any other questions on, I guess, the plans in general? Not seeing any hands. All right. Paul Goldner, did you have a new topic that you wanted to move on to?
Yes. And it did bounce off of what Linda was saying, but it is switching topics to that 3-foot guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Linda said that people have to feel safe. And I have not spoken yet to a teacher who feels safe with the 3-foot guidance. For months, we've been hearing 6 feet. And the guidance that DESE put out has 3 feet as being 4 times more likely to transmit than 6 feet. Teens are getting this at the same rate as adults. So, you know, talk about in a high school setting, it's not safe at 3 feet. I don't think it's reasonable to expect people to feel safe at 3 feet.
So I guess that'll open this discussion that Brian alluded to at the beginning of the meeting. So go ahead, Erin.
So when the discussion came up at the beginning of the call and Brian posed the question, I immediately went and pulled up the CDC guidance, which I will tell you was updated 2 days ago, and it still says 6 feet with your mask on. It does not say anything about lowering it down, and it has an updated, this information has been reviewed and updated as of 7/6/20. So the CDC is still not saying that 3 feet is appropriate, regardless whether or not DESE is saying it's okay.
All right. Other.
I was going to say that's my understanding as well.
Anybody
Do you see
else want to weigh in on?
Can you see Paul Mayette's hand?
Oh, now I can. Yep. Sorry, he was on screen 3. I have the little screens on this laptop. Go for it, Paul Mayette.
I was just looking through the AAP guidance as well, and the language I found around.
Can your volume is really low, Paul.
Oh, let me.
Do you have a mic plugged in somewhere or something?
Is that better?
Perfect.
There he is.
Thank you.
Okay. I had plugged in to take out the earphones for a minute. Just looking through the AAP guidance that we were sent out this week, the language around the 3 feet I found particularly wishy-washy, if that's a technical term, but it said evidence suggests, so that, you know, just the first word suggests, throws me off, that spacing as close as 3 feet may approach the benefits of 6 feet. It just, I don't know. I haven't had an opportunity to look through and find some of that particular science that Paul referenced, the 3 feet it being 4 times as likely as 6 feet, but certainly that was a very hedged statement, I thought, in the AAP guidance as well.
Anybody else? Scanning. Go ahead, Caitlin.
I did the same thing that Erin did. I went to the CDC right when you brought that topic and noted the date, and I read the AP guidance, but none of it was fact. It was more like approaching. It just didn't have enough there to say we can eliminate a 6 feet rule and still maintain safety or mitigate the outcome. So I would like to see more science before we say, yeah, 3 feet sounds fine. 1.5 if someone bends over and tries to grab something. It just doesn't leave a lot of room for error if you go to 3 feet in a school setting.
Other comments from the committee? Maureen?
I just would say that I agree with what everybody's been saying. What Paul just said, that the AAP's guidance on the distancing seems a little wishy-washy to me as well. And I think we're seeing the effects of, you know, the social distancing that's not taking place in the South is really having an impact on the cases down there. Of course, they're also not wearing masks as much, but I'm not comfortable at this time with a 3 feet distance. I think the CDC's guidance of 6 seems like it's a more concrete distance, and we see that it works. So that's my feeling right now.
Other questions or comments from them? I feel like there are committee members. Kaylee?
My only question is, do we know where the 3 feet the state has given us is coming from? Is it from did they take the CDC guidelines and adjust it down due to the average size of a child as opposed to an adult? Or is it just thrown out there? Do we know, or is it?
So I looked that up too. It's the World Health Organization says that you can start mitigating some of the social distancing risk by having the 3 feet. So
Okay.
3 feet is better than no feet, but 6 feet is definitely better than 3.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify on that.
Yeah, so there is a discrepancy between what both of them are publishing out there, but they did say that the 6 feet is better than the 3, and it's only a slight mitigation on the 3 feet.
So, and I think I can take it a step farther than that too, and say that in the guidance, they specifically cite an article from the Lancet, and it is a MERS, SARS, COVID meta-analysis. So they looked at a bunch of different studies, and then they took that data and they looked at mask wearing and the efficacy, trying to pull the data from all of those different sources and kind of analyze it overall. They looked at mask wearing, they looked at distance. I feel like there was a third thing they looked at. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's the last one in the article, whatever it was. So, and it does show basically it's based on risk, but it has a downward sort of trend that it shows that risk drops over that distance, but most significantly between 1 feet and 3 feet. And then it also cites that there are a number of other countries that are looking at going to the 3 foot minimum. Most of those countries seem to base their guidance on the World Health Organization 3 foot that Aaron just mentioned. I have 2 big concerns there. One is that the Lancet article is, it's a meta-analysis, and MERS and SARS aren't exactly like COVID, and the COVID data is less than 10% of the overall data that's in that meta study. So it's heavily weighted toward MERS and SARS. And then my other concern is that I don't know if anybody caught this, but there was a team of 240 epidemiologists and other scientists who wrote to the World Health Organization asking them to reconsider their stance on whether transmission is exclusively respiratory or respiratory and airborne. And the World Health Organization either yesterday afternoon or earlier today actually said that they're going to begin looking at that they had been looking at it as an exclusively respiratory transmission, so droplets, but now they're looking at it, the potential for it being an airborne transmission as well. So I don't know if they're going to change their guidance going forward, but I would say that since they're considering that, it's a possibility that they will. Linda?
We haven't touched on this at all, but what about the social distancing on the bus? I mean, I don't know how we're going to come up with social distancing on the bus unless it's 1 kid to a seat.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I mentioned earlier. That's the guidance we're waiting for. So that they said very clearly, it's important to point out the guidance that came out on June 25th is titled very carefully initial guidance. It's guidance and it's initial. So it's, we fully expect, similar to what we got with the release of the final comprehensive summer school programming for special education, we usually start the programming this week. We got that guidance on July 1st. So we've been promised in the month of July. So we have to plan for all perspectives, but that is a huge question in regards to busing, because keeping 6 feet away, you would basically be using every other seat kind of staggered all the way down. I'm making some guesses based on some conversations with people, but I think a 1 to a seat is a minimum, which if we run 2 to a seat, those buses hold 55 students. If we put 3 to a seat, they're 77 passenger. So that's, call it 24. I keep hearing the term 24 to 25 buses, or I'm sorry, students per bus run. We in essence would likely need to run our runs twice if we're bringing all students back. If we are if in a hybrid model, if we're going group A, group B, alternating every day, as an example, half the students are coming in on Monday, the other half are coming in on Tuesday, then in that situation, we would almost meet that standard. I didn't mention Kyle and I are meeting on Friday, I believe, with NRT.
Correct. Yep.
Along with Dave McGee and Sandy Susie as well, to talk about both special education and regular education. For regular education transportation, they're ready, right? They've got their vans equipped and prepped, and it may mean an additional cost because we're not putting as many students on the van, but they do have protocols in place. They do have their own requirements that they have to, their own checklist, if you will, boxes that they have to check to be continuing as a transportation provider. And then we would certainly be the sorry for the pun, but we're the driver in that situation where we get to determine exactly how things play out. So,
Well, we don't have anything to worry about because I'm sure the state's gonna step up and help us with the busing.
millions of extra dollars.
Wow, the sarcasm.
All right, it's approaching 10 o'clock, the sarcasm hour.
Yes, exactly. Maureen, go ahead.
Brian, I was just going to say, I think that this would be an important survey question for parents because I've been hearing a lot from all different levels of parents that they're already planning on driving their children to school if there's an in-person schooling that's taking place in September. So I think you're going to find a lot of parents won't even try the bus.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So I agree that once we know that definitively, we can ask that question. And once we know the parameters and ask that question, I guarantee that's going to somewhat resolve itself. I think if parents are comfortable sending their students into a classroom, there's one assumption. I think the bus is a very different, it's a very different atmosphere that, we've talked about what's the cost to add a monitor on every bus, and the cost is pretty astronomical. But the bus driver's priority is safely getting every student on her or his bus to school. It can't be the monitor. It can't be enforcing social distancing. It can't be put your mask back on. So that will be a very challenging atmosphere to regulate.
All right. I just want to note again that we can't handle questions from outside the committee during this meeting. I'm very sorry. There are options to definitely ask those questions. We cannot handle them during an open meeting because of open meeting law. So I want to come back to the 3 to 6 though, because I think this is something that the superintendent asked for guidance on, and I don't know if it's the will of the committee to give it to him tonight, but I think, given that he asked for our consideration on that it's something that we need to at least discuss tonight. And if we need to come back to it at another meeting down the road, we need to come back to it at another meeting down the road. But I would like to give him at least a solid answer to either say, yes, we would like to give you guidance tonight, or no, someplace down the road, we'll reconsider this.
And if I can just say, so we need to continue on our trajectory of planning, right? So the the working group needs to continue on the trajectory of planning all 3 scenarios. But if there's a nuance that would allow us to spend more time and energy on any one particular plan, that would be great to determine, not in late August, but, in July.
And along that line, I'll ask a really leading question. Mr. Forget, could we have 100% of the students in the classrooms with 6-foot distancing?
We could not. So actually, I just pulled up my, what was this called? This parametric social distancing tool that DESE provided. So it's it's basic calculation of space and bodies. It makes an assumption for a teacher space, and it makes an assumption for nothing else. I think that is a very clear point. We had that discussion with the working group today, that if teachers and parents understand the only thing that will be in classrooms is a teacher with a desk at the front and students in desks spaced 3, 5, 6 feet apart. There is no other space for any, in an elementary classroom, for stations or a kind of a teacher table or a meeting area with a rug. That is all gone. We will be investing in rental what do you call them, storage pods, because we'll have lots of furniture that we can't use. So the classrooms are literally teacher, students, with, you know, assuming a roughly 30 by 30 classroom is a fairly traditional classroom, a 900 square foot classroom. The model uses its personal space. So in the architectural world, you know, there's an assumption of how wide you are. I am wider than other people. So the assumption is generally a 2.5 to 3 foot personal space is your space. This model measures the edge of my personal space to the start of someone else's personal space. And that's what it uses as the physical distance. So if we use a figure of 2.5 feet for personal space and 6 foot social distancing, we can fit between 12 and 15 students in the average classroom. So in a hybrid model, every other day, group A, cohort A, cohort B, whether that's alternating daily, weekly, there aren't any classes that are 30. So that would allow us to maintain 6 feet with up to 15 students. Again, and that's in a very traditional classroom. With using those same parameters and 3 feet of space, it doesn't double, but it gets us to being able to bring most students back in most classrooms with the 3 feet. Again, I'll whatever the word is, qualify that with, that is students in a grid sitting in desks immobile. That doesn't account for all of the movement. So certainly if you use a 2.5, 3 foot personal space in that 6 foot distancing, that certainly allows for the movement. It allows for, you know, it basically allows to make sure that we can always keep that 3 to 6 foot buffer even when students are moving. And it also allows for, you know, when we are having lunch, that's another big question is, you know, aside from the preschool to first graders that are having masks optional, we know you can't eat with a mask on, and the guidance very clearly says if the mask is off, then 6 feet is the rule. So there's no model that we've come up yet with to figure out how to space, other than starting lunch at about 9 in the morning and ending at about 2 in the afternoon. There really isn't a way to keep people 6 feet apart with all students in schools. So working through that. But the basic answer to your question is still working through. Literally, we're on Friday, the leadership team is meeting, and principals and head custodians are literally mapping, taping, measuring rooms to test this out. But no, at 3 feet, we can do it. At 6 feet, we cannot.
Okay.
Bring everyone back.
See lots of hands all of a sudden. Paul Goldner, I'm just going to go down the list. So it's going to be Paul Goldner, Paul Lees, and Linda.
So just want to reiterate or clarify that point. When you say 12 to 15 people with 6 feet of space, that is still with nothing in the room.
I muted myself. Correct. So we could, I mean, and again, it's physical bodies that need to be the 6 feet apart. So we could pack other things in between the kids, but it doesn't really help with the educational environment that you might understand as a teacher. So yes, it is the physical space between bodies, but yes, that is literally students, a teacher, and his or her desks.
Paul Lees.
Nope, you're muted, Paul.
I can't hear you.
There you go.
Hello.
There you are.
So on the 6 feet, is it shoulder to shoulder or is it more than that? Because this 2.5 personal space thing is really throwing me off.
So the way DESE themselves put out literally a seating chart and measured from the edge of a seat to the edge of a seat as the 3 foot distance.
Okay.
The way that the model is that they are now saying we should use, it assumes a personal space. So it assumes a circumference. You know, if I'm a 6 foot guy, I know my wingspan is 6 feet. So I'm not measuring fingertip to fingertip, but rough shoulder width is about call it 2 feet, 2.5 feet. So it's the edge of my 2 foot, 2.5 foot personal space to your personal space. That distance is the physical distance, whether we're saying 3 feet, 4.5 feet, 6 feet. It's that distance.
So, Marissa, are you still polling people about this issue?
I mean, I'm taking input, so I'm not gonna, I don't even know if we need a vote. In the end, we'll probably just go school committee member to school committee member to give the superintendent some guidance, but discussion is open right now, so.
Yeah, so I mean, my position is 6 feet, but it's always subject to later guidance,
Yeah.
on, what we learn a month, a week from now, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But I mean, if CDC says 6 feet, that's good enough for me.
All right, Linda?
Has any consideration been given? I know that a lot of the classes, you can walk through 2 classes at the same time, where you would have possibly a class maybe at the cafeteria, one in the gym, and then having, opening it up for a classroom to be in 2 classrooms.
So yeah, so the model actually allows for you, they call it recaptured space. So the libraries, the gymnasiums, the auditoriums, and like art, music, PE rooms, which if there's classes, those are classes are being held there. So that's all part of the equation. That is not factored in because you have to have someone who's going to be also teaching that class in that room. So there are folks who have put a model in place. I should say that, who are talking about a model, haven't publicly said here's the model, here's the plan, but have played with the concept of, okay, so we're going to bring every student in every day, but it is theoretically a hybrid model. So you're going to be with Mrs. A on day 1, and then day 2 you're going to be remote, but we're going to have you come to school and sit in the cafeteria, and we're going to have instructional assistants, other staff that aren't necessarily your teacher, but are there to monitor your remote learning over the course of the day. So that means that student is coming in, basically sitting there for 6.5 hours, unless we can figure out a way to move them around. But by and large, those would be fairly large filled spaces with students distanced. And it would be, it wouldn't be, if someone's got their physics teacher teaching them physics, we likely will not have another physics teacher to put in there to address the the questions that student may have about his or her physics work. It would be a kind of a general, I don't want to call it babysitting, but it would not be directed instruction.
And I also am of the CDC guidelines of 6 feet, because I don't think 3 feet is going to be enough distance between students. But I like that model where a week on, week off, but they're still at school.
Haley?
So I just wanted to clarify that there's no way that we could take 2 classrooms with the connecting door in between, open it up, have students in both 6 feet, and have one teacher teaching between the 2 classrooms with an IA watching the other one. Or let's take an IA or other assistant watching. So say one teacher would, like the teacher would teach one of the rooms,
yeah,
and leave them with the work to do.
Yeah.
Give the other one the instruction, and then, like, I don't know, it was just an idea that I had if they went back, because they could have work, and if they had questions, they'd ask the IA. The IA could go to the door and be like, there's this question. Is there any way we could possibly do that model, or do we just not have enough space?
Yeah, so I think, the final point was what I was going to say. So it comes down to every classroom at the high school is full with a teacher, whether that's a regular educator, math, science, you name it. All the spaces are full with an instructor of some sort. So if we could figure out the space, that absolutely would be possible. So as far as a concept, great idea. The question would be, do we have the physical space to do that? And is that classroom free? Obviously at the high school level, where classes change and periods and bell schedules, and it's a very different thing than sitting with the same teacher all day at the elementary school. But there's possibility there, absolutely. The question would be the logistics and the space. Hence the, you know, the gym and the auditorium and the libraries being spaces that they talk about, because they're just large, wide open spaces that we can utilize. We have to have the furniture. We have to have, obviously, lots of pieces to fill in there.
Paulise, do you still have a, nope, you're done. Okay.
Sorry, I forgot to lower his hand. I lowered his hand.
All that time. Anyone else? Caitlin?
Steve, because it's really late, but are you emptying the libraries too? Like when you say emptying, if you're going to use the library as a space for students, are you, like, how empty are we talking building-wise?
So we have not talked about emptying the library. No, I can tell you, as far as I know, that conversation has never been discussed. So classrooms, absolutely. So general classrooms, which are, you know, largely seating areas or sitting areas, you know, storing the carts, the storage, the easels, the tables, and figuring desks out. The library spaces are primarily open space. So it would be maximizing those. And I mean, the concept of moving stacks of books is not easy. So, and we don't have a plan. I can tell you right now, we don't have a plan on the books that utilizes those spaces until we can figure out the staffing of how we would use that.
I should say, I have and can get out to you the model classroom, or Brian might have it easily too, the model kind of classroom diagrams that I have. But by and large, it shows a 6 foot by the width of the classroom space for the teacher, including, that has to include the door swing space. And then literally the entire rest of the floor space is a set distance off the walls, and then 3 feet between each, you know, the outside of one seat and the left side of one seat and the right side of the other, and the front of the desk essentially, and the back of the next desk. So it's literally, if you picture like graph paper and putting a desk at every single intersection, that's sort of what it looks like for the classrooms.
And very specifically, one of the issues is, you know, most of the elementary schools, Pine Grove specifically, just was remodeled. Obviously, all the furniture is tables, and all of the guidance speaks to students have to be facing the same way. So again, that whole concept of aerosolizing, you don't want to be breathing at someone, even if you're 6 feet, if you can be breathing, you know, at the back of someone's head. So that right off the bat means we can't use all those tables. So in a hybrid model where we're bringing half the students in every other day, that becomes more workable to use the desks or the tables that we have. Bringing everyone in, we have to order all new desks pretty much for the entire school. So.
Kaylee?
Are there any guidelines as to if we had like clear, like the dividers in between tables, if we had like 2 kids on each table? Or?
Great question. And the specific recommendation was no, because it's an added space that collects the germs and requires disinfecting on a daily basis. So my understanding, and I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is if you're 6 feet, the distance is what protects you. At 3 feet, again, if you're for short periods of time, you know, I think we mentioned all of the offices are being retrofitted with real glass hygiene barriers, and all the offices, I believe next week, the first starting at the high school and working their way around. So all of that's happening for short interactions. That's helpful. At sitting there for an entire day for 6.5 hours, you basically would need the entire bubble in order to protect you versus the shield. And I mean, I'm always amazed at the propaganda emails that fill my inbox with products for sale, but the sheer amount, I mean, literally 150 a day. And the newest thing is, you know, shields that attach to your shoulders and stand in front of your face. I mean, there's shields for, barriers for your whole classroom, it's unbelievable. But my understanding, the explanation has been, A, it would have to be fully enclosed if you're going to be within that 3-foot bubble, or, within the 6-foot parameter. And B, it's an added surface that needs to be disinfected every day.
So we should just get hamster balls for all the students at this
Yes,
rate?
I like that idea. Yeah.
Love it.
You just need it from the shoulder up, so just like the old-fashioned space helmets.
Maybe sumo wrestler outfits, the inflatable ones. Those-
Someone actually suggested that with some semblance of like reality to it, because it keeps you distant, which the individual is not wrong. It would keep you separated.
The inflatable dinosaur costumes?
Good thing.
Yeah, sumo, dinosaur, all of them. They would work. What's Paul holding up?
I think it's I think it's one of those. Is it one of the going to the sports and get your pen?
It's
The sports huts. Yep.
There's your golf ball.
All right, perfect.
Those are about $100 each. I looked at them for keeping dry at the soccer field.
Perfect.
All right.
24,
Other
25.
commentary? All right. So I don't think you want to vote, Brian.
I don't. And again, I genuinely wanted to put it out there as a framing discussion from a policy perspective that is in your wheelhouse. And again, I don't know that you can legally make the decision, because theoretically, if we're in an emergency situation or emergency proclamation by the governor and guidance has been issued, I guess the question comes down to, I'm happy to, say no if we know what the consequences are. If it's a slap on the wrist and we're making a decision in what we believe is in the best interest of the health and safety of our students and staff and families, I'm okay if the punishment is minimal. So I just wanted to put that out there as kind of framing that. I think that's a key policy decision that in the coming weeks that I think is going to fall on you to make. I don't think it has to happen tonight. I think this is, again, as it was last week when you all indulged my question about where you were. I think this is good data as we go back and continue to work with the working group. That certainly we have to work the plan. We have to have the plan for bringing everyone back. But if we're leaning towards the hybrid, I don't think we're going to be at a fully remote plan unless a fully remote model, unless the data starts swinging in the other direction. But I think it's my own perspective is whether I'm speaking with you all, looking at the data, talking to other superintendents, is it certainly seems like people are pushing towards the hybrid as the most feasible model right now. So that certainly gives us guidance as where to put our time and energy with this working group, and then all the individual subgroups that are doing detail work outside of that process. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And I think to just go back to this real quick too, one of the reasons why I asked you, to be fair, the question this afternoon about whether 6 feet pushes us to a hybrid model is because there are additional concerns there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge ones, big ones, right? Yeah. We have students that may have other risk factors that we're not catching because they're not in the classroom 100% of the time. It definitely puts a lot of families out that are dual income families, and that's something that I think can't be
minimized.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge impact. Yeah.
Very, very big impact. Yeah. For me personally, this comes down to, a huge inconvenience, but still an inconvenience versus potentially death or a significant disability potentially as a result for staff or students of contracting a much higher chance of contracting COVID. I don't think we'll, with anything we do, we put stairs in our schools, right? There's a chance of somebody falling down them.
Yeah.
It's all about, to me, it's all about mitigating risk to a level that's acceptable. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that 3 feet is an acceptable risk for this. I think it outweighs, going to 6 feet outweighs any other negative consequences that could occur because of that difference between a full in-classroom and a hybrid model. especially if the hybrid model, as Paul Lees has so advocated for, is as solid as it can possibly be. And I will just come back and say that again, if we're going in this direction, I think my two biggest qualifications on it have to be that remote model has to be solid, right? If they're going to be remote or even just not explicitly taught for their B time, their off time,
Yep.
right? When a student isn't getting explicit instruction, whatever that may look like, I think that the remote has to be solid. That other piece has to be solid, not just what's happening in the classroom. And then the other piece is, I don't know if there's any way to prioritize, but I feel like there are kids that have to be prioritized into being in school as frequently as possible. So I don't even know if there's a way to do that, but
Absolutely.
I think that's something that those are my two biggest caveats, I guess, to attach to this idea of, yes, I believe 6 feet is the best way, but I also believe these two things are the things that have to be considered as part of that.
Unequivocally. Yeah, absolutely. And I know we could launch into the whole discussion that the opening group has been tackling, but even the plans and the thought around, even when students are in school, if we're in a hybrid model, working towards the times when they're remote. So using that model interplay so that it becomes the norm, so that students are with teachers and working in a certain capacity, and also the next day when they're home, they're working on their own. It becomes the norm. The greatest challenge this spring was disappeared on Friday afternoon and didn't reappear. Whereas if we have students every other day, that day of remote learning at home, and again, I keep saying day on, day off, that seems to be where the latest discussion was, but there's the week on, week off discussion too. But that day on, day off with a teacher for the day, the next day working independently remotely, that can be very focused time. And then they're back with the teacher the next day. So by the very nature and the structure of it, it will be eons better than what we did in the spring. And unequivocally, I've said to you, I've said to others that, look, we've got time to plan for this and are planning for this, so we have to be better, right? I'm proud of what we were able to do in the spring, but it was not anywhere near ideal. And it was, yes, we were better on June 16th than we were on March 16th, but we have an opportunity here to bring teachers back and do training and be far more equipped to make the remote learning more effective. Absolutely.
Paul Goldner and then Paul Lees.
I was going to say that I want to push back on the idea that what we're talking about returning children to is a classroom. It is not. This is not a classroom. We're talking about taking everything out of a room so that we can fit enough students in there to get them in the building as child storage. That's what the DESE document is outlining: child storage and babysitting. It is, and taking care of students by seeing them from 6 feet away. I can't evaluate student work from 6 feet away, and that 60% of my time with students is walking around the room and making sure what they are doing is being done in a logical and correct way, but I can't see their paper from 6 feet away. In the elementary grades, it's the manipulatives and the centers and the stations and the interacting that is what makes a classroom. We are not talking about a classroom in the best of circumstances when we send our children to school. We are talking about a place to keep them so their parents can work and they can see people.
So I guess I have a slightly more optimistic view of it than that, but yes, I appreciate your opinion. Paul Lees?
So I don't know, Narissa, but did you say that I was favoring the hybrid?
No, I said that you had said repeatedly that the remote has to be strong.
Right.
And that I agree with that.
And so one of the questions I do have, I don't favor any of the plans right now. I'm waiting for more information, but one of the questions that just occurred to me, and I'm not really looking for an answer, but maybe in a week or 2 or 3 weeks, we'll have a better answer, but I can't fathom how a teacher in a hybrid model could cover the same amount of material as either remote or in person. because they've only got half the people in front of them. I just don't, and I guess it all relies on what was just said, that home learning by a student continues the education plan. But I think at the end of the day, that's a stretch. That's my own 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack, but the concept actually allows, I think, for even greater learning than purely remote, in that there is teacher FaceTime, right? Several people have said it, especially committee members who are teachers, right? It's teaching is relational. It's about making relationships with your students in trust and confidence, and instilling confidence in that. And it's not just about the content we teach. So that happens in person. I think we did a good job doing the best we could this spring, but the concept of having every other day, every other week, still with that face-to-face, will make the independent remote learning time far more impactful than when there's the only interaction is this, right? Through a Zoom screen where I'm sitting in this room in my home. Yeah.
Haley?
And the thing I think of with the hybrid is the main thing I think of is it allows for things like labs, or for teachers to check in if students are actually doing the work, or if it's just, hey mom, here's my paper, you want me to pass this class? Or it's even, okay, I'm just going to Google this math problem because I didn't do that, but I know of people that did. And you can't say that you're offering the same level of education to all students when you have one student whose parent has a doctoral degree in math, while you have another student whose parents graduated high school. I just don't see how that would work. So I think that's the big thing, reason why I personally like the hybrid.
Back to equity, as Kim was talking about now hours ago.
All right. Any other commentary on this before we move on? All right. Anybody else have any big questions that they want to raise? You're all sleeping. Oh, Paul Mayette, go for it. We haven't heard from you in a while. Oh, we lost your volume again.
There you go.
Thank you.
I had just had one question. As Kim was going through everything, I heard a lot of really great ideas. The PD stood out, the stand-up desks. I know I learned a lot about how elementary school kids operate during the homeschooling and watching that. So I think those are great ideas. I'm just wondering if we are keeping any kind of running tally of what those things would cost as we go, and maybe prioritizing some tool that we A, would know what the costs would be, and B, would give us a way to prioritize what we can do, can't do, as those come up.
So I'm making a list of what we have for additional items that would require some costs to it associated with it. So absolutely. And I will keep Brian and Kyle updated on that list. I promise.
Thank you.
I'm muted, but I was just saying the perfect time for Kyle to decide to become a business manager.
Yeah.
I mean, the world literally came crashing down. Oh, and let's figure out how to make the money work, by the way.
Yeah.
So yes,
Always up for the challenge.
that's right. He's got lists to manage for sure. And I think, there've been costs floated out. I mean, there's associations that talked about, $1.8 million in additional costs. I think I don't want to claim anyone's sensationalizing things, but I mean, there isn't $1.8 million in additional costs for us to be able to do a good job. I mean, flat up, right? We could put a one-to-one device in every kid's hand and it'd probably do that for about $150,000 if we were doing it on a lease. So if you say, yes, we need to run all of our buses 4 times, yes, you get to those kind of astronomical figures. But we know that's not going to be the way it's going to play out. So, I mean, I think that we're quantifying, and I think lead times on desks is very different than lead time on hand sanitizer. So, there's certainly prioritizing those things, but there are definitely things that we will need to purchase, and it will be considerable. It'll be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Absolutely. So we certainly are going to need that money in whatever capacity it comes through, and hopefully be held harmless with state aid. So, so the one thing just to leave you with, so in regards to the 177 days versus 180, just as a concept that we've been talking about. So obviously the value is teachers are now, teachers are not under contract right now. I mean, they are, but they're not working. So they return on Monday, August 31st. The current plan calls for students to return 8 weeks from today, which is Wednesday, September 2nd, I believe. If those 3 days are removed from the academic year, they remain in the teacher's work year. So that would give us, rather than 3 days of professional development, it would give us 6 days. And we talked about pulling that November PD day, as well as using convocation day, because we're certainly not putting 425 faculty and staff in the auditorium on opening day, but using all 6 of those days to stack at the beginning of the year. That would allow us to bring faculty and staff back and have 6 consistent consecutive days of training, preparation, if it's making physical alterations in the classrooms for either an in-person or remote model, or training in regards to the remote aspect and in whatever capacity. So that is what we talked about. Again, not asking you to make that adjustment yet, but that would mean that teachers would all return on Monday the 31st and be in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. By contract, we're closed that Friday and then Labor Day. Then use the Tuesday, Wednesday as well, which I believe is the 7th and 8th, or 8th and 9th. And then bring students back. The first days of school would be Thursday and Friday is at the 10th and the 11th. I'm not looking at a calendar. And even talked about using those 2 days as half days. And if we were in a hybrid model with a cohort A, cohort B, that all students are in either Thursday or Friday, they do a half day, they come in, they're masked, they practice, they try a routine, they try a cycle. We figure out transitions, we serve lunches, we figure that all out in half-day model, transition kids home, do the same thing for cohort B on Friday. And then Monday, I think was the 14th of September would be the first full days of school. So again, that's not a formal proposal, just to give you kind of some thinking about how we would use those days if we do have that change, which I do anticipate that the commissioner is going to relax those 3 days. So that would give us significant planning time, speaking back to Paul's point, Narissa's point, everyone else's point, that there is a high expectation that we're going to do this well. And it gives us the days to prepare and make sure that's the case.
Thank you, Brian. Can I just come back to one question? What is the plan with surveys, if I could, Kim? Because it sounded like, I don't know, I heard some pushing it off, and then what's the plan?
So right now we are thinking about creating that survey, but like Brian said, without leading the folks to the understanding that they have a choice and that we have an alternative plan for them, but really just finding out what do we need to do to support you and your child when they return to school in September. And so allowing for them to respond in a way that is going to help guide our process as far as the opening plans, but not in any way, shape, or form lead them down the path that we have these other options for them. And if they want to do a hybrid model, then we're going to move into that model. Or you get to choose if you want to send your child back. More so just asking what would make your child or you more comfortable, or what do you need to transition back to school? That makes sense.
Okay. And what's the timing on that?
So we just started working through that today. I would say by next week you can have a draft. It's going to be a short survey at this point with the limited information. If between now and next week we have more guidance and a clearer path, we could certainly change and revise it and add some additional questions. We might have transportation information too.
I was gonna say, like the transportation, the 177 days, and that remote, that self-paced remote option changed everything in the way that first survey could be formulated. And I've spoken to several superintendents who I'm friendly with, who asked questions and are deeply regretting it because the floodgates have opened in regards to, great, so now that we've asked that, here's what I'd like to do. And that wasn't all the intention. So again, I feel like there's a couple of those little very key factors that if we can just confirm those things, it gives us a meaningful, we keep talking about what's the purpose of the survey. There's the value of gaining perspective from parents. And we just have to make sure we're asking the right questions. And
And I do think within the next, I'm being optimistic, but I do believe within the next few days, by this time next week, we will have some additional information.
Wow, I like your crystal ball.
Thanks.
I'm less optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, I will continue meeting, but I hope there's at some point where we just say, we have to survey, because we know that surveys typically take at least 7 to 10 days, right? To get yourself a good subset of results. Typically, if you can let them go 14, that's what I've always been told is the optimal kind of time frame to allow for good responses in. And time is ticking. And if we add those, just call them 2 weeks, on the end of going to Dave McGee's point, getting guidance on July 1st and expecting to have in a summer program on the 6th, it leaves us no time. So I hope there's a point where we just simply say, yes, there's huge risk, but the risk is going to have to be taken because we simply can't wait.
Right. So I guess I would ask for clarification on the purpose of the survey so that we can generate the questions that actually address the purpose, right? So are we asking, what is the, like for me, I was thinking the purpose would be, if we know we have to bring kids back, and right now that's the direction we're going to, asking parents, what can we do to make this transition manageable and successful for you and your child, right? So, or is the purpose to find out how uncomfortable people feel, and are they going to send their child to school? I guess that's my question. So that would help me in the planning group to really develop those questions that would be very reflective of the purpose.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are good. In my mind, those can wait. One of the biggest questions in my mind, because it's such a cost, and I feel like there's a little room right now to maybe make an adjustment, is transportation.
Okay.
I think that's going to affect everything you do, and the more that you have that to use as a base for your planning, the better off you are. If we're in a situation where we're going to have to run multiple runs in a day, that's going to change everything, versus if, I'm just going to pull numbers. I mean, if it's 25% of parents that say that, they're going to drop their child off at school versus 60% that, students can drive themselves, that's a huge difference to me in everything that would roll out from there. And that's one of the, I guess, most pressing questions that I keep coming up with is that changes the whole structure of your day.
Yeah. And I would say if anybody else has any specific questions kind of related to that topic or that purpose or that theme, to definitely send them my way.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying.
I would caution against that though, because I would think that if you open the door and ask them about the transportation, they're going to assume that you're sending the kids back full time, or their answer might change depending upon what model we use and whether or not they're going back to work, or if they're not going back to work, if it's a hybrid model and it's only every other day that they're doing it. So I don't know if asking them solely the transportation question right now is going to solve any budgetary concerns or be able to give us enough direction to start going forward and making the decisions that way.
I think you have to caveat at it, right? Just like anything else. If you caveat it and say, here's DESE's goal essentially, and that's kind of what we know is the big global picture, that there are 2 models that your students could end up either full-time in school or at least on a part-time basis in school. Would your student be riding that bus in that case? And you have a yes, no, unsure. I think that gives you a good basis without having a commitment or opening up a door. I don't know.
I think my concern is the fact that we don't know what the bus will look like. The logical follow-up question from parents will be, so the question has to be, do you intend to ride the bus? They're going to say, well, how many kids are you stacking? Are you stacking every other seat? I might consider that, right? If you're literally doing diagonal every other seat and keeping 6 feet, we have to do it 4 times if everyone's riding, but more parents logically would likely say, yes, we'll do that, versus if it's 1 to a seat versus, I don't know, we're just throwing as many as we can on, and, you know, kids, do your best to wear your mask and socially distant. I literally don't know what to expect, because that wouldn't be far-fetched at this point coming from Desi. So I think that's my concern is I don't want to ask the question unless I can give the parameters that I'm asking about. So that's what I was saying, like, if we knew the transportation, the school year, and that remote, we could literally do a meaningful survey that gives concrete options, and that literally launches us to make huge decisions in the next couple of weeks once we have more clear information. So I agree. I want a survey as soon as possible.
I just think this is, you know, you talk about linchpins, that one thing that makes everything turn and move.
Yeah.
To me, transportation is that, without those other two necessarily being, you know, on the same level. But
Yep. I agree. They promised that the transportation guidance would be coming ahead of the final plan, that it was going to be separate.
All right.
So, which that could come August 1st.
Coming earlier. My crystal ball told me.
All right. Other questions? Kaylee?
Hi. If we do have to do multiple routes, I just wanted to throw out the idea, would we be planning on starting the routes earlier? Or would it just be that we'd be more time for the buses in the morning and pushing the day back? I know there's no guidance yet, so.
Nothing firm yet, but I definitely
would
we would not start high school runs any earlier. I can promise you that, Kaylee.
My
That's the one
bus
you want to
shows up
confirm
at
tonight.
6:40 in the morning.
We were thinking like 5, 6, 7, and 8 a.m. were going to be the staggered times. I don't know if that works for you. Yeah, we had not talked, but I think, you know, with all the discussion about that, the science saying that we should be starting high schoolers later, I certainly don't think we'd be looking to start you any earlier. That's for sure. Yeah.
All right. Other questions? Okay. So, Brian, one thing I forgot to ask you on our call today was what you wanted to do about a next meeting, since I know you have some vacation days coming up.
So the only time I'm taking off all summer is next week.
Yes. And it's all week, right?
It is a solid week on an island in the middle of a lake, not anywhere warm.
So I'll leave it up to the committee at this point and take some input here. I don't know. I mean, we could potentially meet without Brian and at least get an update from Kim without, you know, so it would be, I think, less Desi, more return to school working group, right? Or we could push it off another week, which 2 weeks to me feels like a really long time right now. We could try and pull it in to an earlier day in the week to make it more like a 10-day break in between. What would give me some thoughts? What would you guys prefer? Not going to 10:30 at night, clearly. Maureen.
I'm fine with meeting next week with Kim and getting an update on where they're at in their planning, and maybe if her crystal ball is correct, there might be some more information she can share with us. So it's fine with me.
Okay. Anybody else have strong opinions on this? Is everyone okay? Can you give me a thumbs up if you're good with meeting next week? Ooh, like a double thumbs up, single thumbs up. All right. Oh, Kaylee's got a side and a thumbs up. Is that a maybe working?
Yeah, my work schedule gets released like week by week, so.
Well, we'd love to have you if you can make it, but I think it makes sense to go ahead and go for that date without having the superintendent, even though we wouldn't have the superintendent there, and just keep ourselves on a weekly schedule, and, you know, we'll do what we can because that's where we're at. All right, so that would set the next meeting for, oh, can access the calendar there.
15th.
So it'd be the 15th at 7 p.m. then. All right. So Brian, can you just get out an agenda before you leave?
Yep, absolutely.
Please. Thank you.
So we'll post it for
All right.
Friday. We'll post the same one
Mhm.
agenda, just a update and discussion.
I think you can literally change the dates from tonight's and
Yep.
just repost the same thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Oh, go ahead, Kaylee.
I just realized that there's this really stupid question that someone had asked me a few weeks ago. I know you had rescinded the parking fee for the high school. Are we going? I think the student body would be fine if we have to pay for parking this year personally, but I just wanted to throw out there that that's being asked.
I appreciate that.
It is still been eliminated currently.
Yeah. So I'm not, just to rehash real quick, because I'm not sure if you were here for it, is towns passed our budgets, which is good because we're like 70-ish, 75-ish% funded by the towns, but the state funding is
decreasing.
Knows at this point. They're going month to month, and they've said that they're doing that at least until, I believe they approved it through the end of August. So there's a chance that they could come back. We've been told that there's a chance that they could come back and say, we're cutting your aid by 20%. And if that comes about, we're going to have some serious reconnoitering to do. And I would say even with the COVID expense costs that we heard about tonight, our ESSER, which is part of the CARES Act funding, is only a little over $200,000. So that's only going to go so far against those expenses. So that's going to have to be something that's going to be, considered too. So ongoing conversation, revisited at some point here, I would say, in a more substantial manner. But
thank you.
You have where we're at right now. Just can't make any promises it's going to stay that way. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you. And I need a roll call vote, please. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yeah.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Linda?
Yes.
Thank you. Paul Mayette? Oh, he's just gone, apparently.
No, he's there.
He's good. All right, and I'm a guest too. So thank you all. I know we bored you to death clearly, but but thank you all for coming tonight. And 3.5 hours. I think we're breaking records. I'm pretty sure that we've never done quite like this in the past, but I appreciate everybody being all in for the duration here, because this is, I would say, more than any of us signed up for at this point. So thank you and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Have a great night.
Take care.